Hello everyone, can everyone hear me? I'm just going to give everyone an opportunity to let me know that this is actually bloody working before I just start yapping on. Just give everyone a moment to let me know they can hear me. I'm ready for an iconic session. Yes, thank you, dear Sid. Your support is never taken for granted, I'll tell you that much. I'm ready for an iconic lesson about iconic characters. The mic sounds slightly quiet. Yes, I am British. I am a fool and I'm a British little lad. So yes, you will have to bear with that, I'm afraid. Yeah, Mike, let me see if I can increase the volume for you. How about this? Is this better? How about this? Is that better? I'm going to give everyone an opportunity to let me know that's working. I can indeed hear you. Thank you, Matthew. Alright. I think we're probably fine. What I'll actually do is I'll increase this to let's go another 8 decibels. I'm getting big thumbs up. There we go. We'll go with that. That's probably much better. Right, I can see behind Barnacles here. Hello, hello, hello. And my dear friend Luke. Thank you, Luke, for stopping by. I don't know where I'd be without you, to be honest. Right, so this is a very ad-lib first session on lessons on virtual worlds. Essentially, what I'm going to do is try to help everyone get into Blender, how to do the things I do, how to use the models I've set up. I didn't model these. Great people like Sid and Frambo have modeled these parts, but I've pieced them together and rigged them and given them materials in Blender, so anyone and everyone can download the file. It's linked in the description. It's on Gumroad. It should be completely free, just because Google Drive is a pain to host things on. You should be able to download that and then start immediately. Step 1, delete cubes. Step 2, to profit. Yes, that's exactly it. You should be able to immediately download that and essentially see a screen like I do. You'll have all 6 Terramata, a camera, and the 6 bow arc. And for those of you who've never used Blender before in your life, this is really for you. This is designed to get you guys up and running, because I see a lot of great art in the community. Art from stud.io, drawings, paintings, God knows whatever, photography. And for me, I started out drawing and stud.io and even SFM back in the day. And eventually, as I found them too limiting, I turned to Blender. And apart from one brilliant video by Glaucon Media, which is online, which is also in the description, there wasn't really any just easy tutorials on how to get started. I, for the life of me, didn't know how to pose characters until I had to spend about, I don't know, 5 hours trying to even work out the terminology for it. This video is so anyone and any person of any skill set can watch this video, download this file, follow the bits and bobs I'm going to talk about, and just get started. You won't need to worry about complicated terminology, setting things up, rigging, blah, 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 blah. You don't need to worry about any of that. So, in that instance, what I'm going to do is we're going to go through some prerequisites, some things I think is a good idea to get you guys set up before we actually do anything here. I haven't used Blender before. I've always wanted to learn it. Perfect. Yeah, so behind Barnacle, this is a perfect opportunity for you, other people like you who may have that creative spark and want to create something that's really cool. And you have these ideas in your mind, but when you actually sit down and try to do it, you think, I haven't got a bloody clue what I'm doing. And then you just stop. And very, very few people end up actually making things. And so that is what this is designed for. I've just noticed I'm not recording, so I'm going to start recording, even though I believe YouTube does record this for me, but I don't want to take any risks. Hey, it's me, Christian Faber. Hi, Christian. Christian named Tom. Right, so I'm just going to run through some prerequisites. I'm just getting my checklist because I'll tell you what, I will forget things, and I did write it down. Ba-ba-ba-ba-bum. Ba-ba-ba-ba-bum. Right, so first and foremost, what we need is to make sure when you're in Blender, it's really just one thing. Well, there's two things that I think everyone should get, and that's going to make your life so much easier. And it's this thing called Blender Kit. Now, AJ's here. AJ, Luke, Sid, you guys probably already know what this is. For those of you who don't know what Blender Kit is, Blender Kit, and I'm going to get a tab here for you to show you how to get it and what is Blender Kit. Blender Kit, I'm going to bring it onto the screen, should be able to see this, is an add-on for Blender, completely free, and you download it, and it's really, in fact, here's a little video on how to do it. You download it, you go preferences, and then you go to, I use Blender exclusively to port to Studio, so I don't know what it is. Ah, perfect. Well, yeah, so here we go. You go install, you find the zip file that you've just downloaded, you just tick it, and that's it. It's like a 5-step process. It's really easy, and this website, of course, has this looping video to get you to grips with it. What is Blender Kit? Let's get rid of that. Blender Kit is a repository of community-made assets, and that can be anything from models to materials to skies to entire made scenes. So, for example, this little tab here at the top, that is the search bar for Blender Kit. And I'm on the models tab right now, so you see it says find models. This is just a bunch of models, and you can just drag and drop any of them. So if I wanted to, I could take this chair, drag it, drop it, let go, voila, we have a chair. And that can work with anything. It can, like, I'm just going to delete that chair, we don't need it. But if I type in a tree, for example, it's going to load, and there's a bunch of trees. And I can just drag them in and drop them. And there we go, we have a tree. And you can do this as many times as you like, for as many things as you like. And we're going to use this a lot in this session to essentially speed up the process of blocking out a scene and giving ourselves environment. Because it's one thing to have shiny Lego pieces, it's another thing to have them in a world. Lucy's asked, are they stored locally? Yes, so what happens is all these are on the cloud. So every single one of these are stored in the cloud, in Blender Kit's repository. When you click and drag it to your computer, it will download a copy. So for example, if I do this one right here, and I drag, you'll notice it will say, looking for asset, downloading. It was really quick, you could barely tell it. But it is downloading that asset to the computer. I don't need those. Another thing to note is every time you drag and drop something, if you, by the way, can't see your things anymore, the search items for the things you're trying to find, trees, rocks, cars, whatever you want it to be, just press this little eye symbol. It'll bring it back. You can go on to the next row here. Now, word of precaution, I pay for Blender Kit. There you go, AJ's asked. There is free versus Blender Kit. So the paid version gives you access to everything on there. Free gives you access to many things. Not everything, some things are paid. I actually started out on the free version for about a year. I want to say about half of the posters I made in the book were on the free version of Blender Kit. So what you saw there, you will be able to do as well. I literally just pulled assets from there and used them to create the art. And if you want to filter, you can press this little symbol here, this kind of filter symbol. And if you click on that, there's a bunch of options, and I can click free first, and it will now show me the free options before it starts showing me the paid options. So don't worry like, oh no, I've got to start buying things. No, you don't have to buy anything. It's entirely optional. This whole lesson is to make sure that people can essentially just start going immediately without having to pay a penny. And that's why I'm also giving you the Blender model for free as well. So, in terms of using Blender, how do we use it? So I would recommend, if you have a laptop and you don't have a number pad, you've got a good voice. Thank you. My voice, bear in mind, you may have noticed online I've said I'm ill, so what you're hearing right now is a slightly bunged up, more tired version of myself. Usually I'm far more animated and way more verbose, but today I am a bit under the weather, soldiering through it, but we'll get there. The free one has a lot of resources. Yes, AJ, the free one has so many resources. The only reason I went to paid is because I wanted to support the people that allowed me to create the art that I do. A good old British voice, yes. The British can never do anything wrong. The British Empire, what was that? Nah, just a blip, just a blip. So what I'm going to do is, before we start using Blender, again, I'm going to start showing you how to actually use Blender. Basics. If you're on a laptop, I really recommend getting a mouse, not a trackpad, a mouse with a middle click button. There is a very big reason for that. David, thank you very much. No problem at all. Hope you enjoy it. There's a very big reason I want a mouse, because a mouse has a middle click, and the middle click allows you to use the mouse to rotate around your screen. So you'll notice that what I'm doing right now to rotate, orbit left to right or up and down or any direction at all, what I'm doing is I'm holding down the middle mouse button and then moving my mouse as such. And then if I want to, rather than rotating the camera, if I want to move it, like if it's a first-person game and you want to go left and right and forward and backwards, what you want to do is hold down the Shift key on your keyboard. Then, oh, someone is sending me a lovely message about film. You want to hold down the Shift key on your keyboard and the middle mouse button, and then drag. And rather than orbiting or rotating, instead you will move side to side or up and down relative to where you're looking. If you just listen to that, it's going to be quite confusing, so I'd recommend just giving it a go. It will just click the same way if you play a game and you instantly start moving it around. You think, oh, this makes a bit of sense. It's the same in Blender. You'll get used to it pretty quickly. And with those two tools, you can look around your scene. And you'll notice that I've kind of set everything up for you. I've got a scene, I've got another window over here. I'll go over all of this in a bit as well. There's a lot of preamble here to get you guys going. But it's important that you do. Caps lock, thank you very much, LG. But it's important to make sure you've got the basics, and everyone's got the basics, and everyone understands how the basics works before we just start talking about art and composition and lighting and volumetrics and so on and so forth. So with that, you can move around the scene. Now, some quick shortcut keys, which are really, really handy, and I use these like all the time, is like if you guys have used stud.io before, it's very similar to that. If you have a number pad on your keyboard, laptop users may not have this, but there is a way around it. I just don't know off the top of my head. Maybe someone in chat can pop that down. Pressing the number pad and going 1 will take you to the front on view. Now we are perfectly front on, and this is what we call, I think it's orthographic. Yeah, orthographic. So this is an orthographic view. What this means is there's no depth. It doesn't look like our eyes look. Everything's flat, and it's perfectly flat on. And we can still move around this. Hold the Shift key, press your middle mouse button. You can, move around this plane. You can very, quickly move. Likewise, you can see it on the side. David, just don't use a laptop. I mean, I personally would like to get a laptop, but they do have their downsides. There is a way in Blender to turn the number keys at the top of your laptop to do the same thing. Obviously, that is the downside of you not being able to type numbers. I don't have a laptop, so I don't know that off the top of my head, but it is a quick 5-second Google search if that's something you guys are interested in. Alternatively, you could just plug a keyboard into your laptop. I used to do that when I was younger. So, that's front on view. 1 brings you to the front on view. You can purchase a numpad that can be plugged in. Perfect, Sid. Perfect. Thank you so much for that. If you press 3 will take you to a side on view. You can see perfectly side on now. Let's go 7. 7 brings you to a top-down view, bird's eye. We're looking directly down on our characters. Steal a computer from your local library. They're free, so you can just take them. Rebel nature. Thanks, Tom. Truly, you are the Christian Faber of our time. Holding Alt can also snap you into orbit view. Oh, my lord. Lucy, I never knew that. You've taught me something today. This should be called Lucy Lessons. Bloody hell. The future's now. Right. Before I get distracted by that amazing Reveal. We're all learning today. Yeah, we are. I mean, honestly, I'm a beginner. I'm constantly asking questions. I'm asking questions to Sid, and I'm asking questions to Olu and Frambu and so many other talented people that know way more than me. The point I'd like to get across is I know the basics. I am just a learner, but I've made the art I've done. Anyone at any stage of any skill can do what I've done, and hopefully this lesson and these lessons I'm about to do can help you get more people involved or more people confident and not scared pee pee poo poo. Yes, not scared about actually doing art and not getting put away by how complicated Blender might seem. So yep, 1 front on, 3 side on, 7 bird's eye. And if you want to pop out of orthographic view, and just to remind you, orthographic is the technical term for things looking flat like they are right now, press 5 on your number pad. All of a sudden things have depth, and you can see there's depth through our characters here. 5 again brings you back to orthographic view. And this works anywhere. If I just rotate my camera like this, we have depth. But if I press 5, there's no depth. We've gone back to orthographic view. So you can do that at any time. I mean, it may not be useful, but it may be useful. Maybe you want to make like a tilt shift kind of art piece, in which case an orthographic camera may be the best option for you. And if you want to rotate at like increments of angles, so I think it's 45 degrees. Pardon me. Yeah, I'm really not well. If you want to rotate at 45 degrees, you can press the 8 key to quickly go up. Might be 25 degrees. Is it 25 degrees? I don't know. And likewise, you can do it with 4 and 6 and 2, and you can quickly get to grips with that. And if you get confused and you think, oh, my view is not making any sense, just press 1 and you'll be back to a normal view, and then anytime you can move around. That's a lot of preamble just to say you can move the camera, but I promise you, to some of you, you may think this is really basic. To some people, they have never used a program like this before, and if I don't talk about this stuff now, they'll probably never have the tools to learn this stuff and to just get going. Maybe they're the next best artist, but they don't understand how to use the basic functions, and this is just getting more people into it, really. I think it's 22.5 or 1/4 of 90. Yeah, thank you, Lucy. That's super awesome. The reason I was intimidated was that I'd have to model it myself. Yes, Matthew. The great thing about being a Bionicle fan is there is a humongous community of people that have made these models for people like myself and you to download for free and to make wonderful art of. These models were not made by me. They're freely available by the community. You can download them in the many custom packs. I'm sure Sid will prompt us with the exact names because I have not memorized them. But those, what can I say? Those packs allow us to create all the Bionicle sets in 3D. Most people use stud.io, the digital construction collection. Thank you, AJ. That's super helpful. Although, just to clarify, the digital construction collection, for those of you who don't know, it's basically a repository of a variety of parts and characters modelled by the community, utilising parts packs from many, many different people. So I'd still recommend getting the parts packs from people like King Sid, and I think it's... is it Vroom? Or I always forget the names of people. I really hope you save this stream for future reference. Yes, it will be saved. Thank you, Christian Faber. It will be saved. God. Right. I did have a lovely spreadsheet on how to do things, but it seems to have not been here. But I'm sure I'll find that soon enough. So, we can now use our camera to move around the scene. Let me explain what all these buttons and everything mean. Siddo Pack is available for download. Yes, everyone should go and check out the Siddo Pack on Gumroad. And the Biopack is available for Discord. There's many other packs from humongously talented community members who've made these pieces. Show them your love, show them your support. They work hard to make the pieces like my art possible. If they didn't do the hard work, you never see the art. You guys never be able to do it in stud.io. No one will be able to do the stuff they do. It's a community effort, so we should all be supportive of each other. Thank you, No the Robot. Great to see you here, dude. Great to see you. I've loved working with you. And everyone, if you want to see some amazing animations, you should go and check out No the Robot stuff. Also helps I did a few of them, all the lighting of his wonderful animations myself, but nonetheless, he's absolutely bloody talented, I'll give you that much. Right, so how to use Blender. Blender like any program, has windows. And this window right here, I'm moving my mouse along. I've just decided, you can make it in any way possible. I've decided this is my edit window. There's probably technical names you would use, but you can make it in any way, shape or form. Yeah, just to clarify, Voot Kaboot on Linktree. That's exactly the one you want to go to. That will have the repository of all the Blender parts, other stud.io parts, sorry. So go and check that out. So if you want to create a new window, it's really simple. You just move your mouse over to a corner of a window. You can see the window cuts here. I've got a mouse in the corner. It can be any corner. It could be down here. It could be down here. Just drag. And there you go. There's a new window. And you can do this as many times as you like. Look, I could go to town here and make too many windows. But if you get confused easily like I do and you just want to keep it simple, my recommended workflow, and people have different workflows and that's completely fine, but my recommended workflow is I have one scene viewer here where I can see everything, you know, all my pieces just kind of freely, and then to the side I'll have my viewer, and this is what my camera can see. And again, to get this, if I just remove it so I can show you how I did it, I just brought this out. Again, we got a scene like this. I have a camera here. I'll show you how to make a camera in a moment. But once you've got a camera, just press the 0 on your numpad. Ta-da! We are now looking through the perspective of the camera. And if you want to zoom in, what you want to do is hold Control on your keyboard and then the middle mouse button and move it up and down. Or left and right technically, but mainly up and down. And there you go. You can zoom in and out, so you can make it fill the screen more. And you don't need to be exact with this. It's, you know, it's not a science. I'm sure there's a way to make it even more exact, but this is how I've done it for many months, and I'm sure someone's going to chime in and say, actually, I think you'll find there's a better way. And my world will be rocked. Of course, you've got all this stuff going on, all these bars here and all these bones, which I'm going to go over in a bit as well anyway. If you want to get rid of them, which I do for my viewing tab, for my camera perspective, what you want to do is you want to untick this little button here, just to show you what this does. This is your gizmos. I'm going to show you what all these do in a bit. But if you untick it, and then this one here, these are your overlays. Notice how everything's now gone. And to get rid of this, you can press T, or you can just drag it to the side like that. And of course, we don't need all this stuff to the side here. You can just bring your window in like that. And of course, I've set this up for a portrait perspective. If you want it to be a widescreen, you can go to your camera and you can go to this button right here, Output Properties. I'm going to go through all these in a bit, but just to get you up and started, Output Properties. And then here you see it says Resolution, X and Y. You know how, like, for those of you who may not be aware, if you've got a 3D if you've got a like a TV, you can get a HD TV, which is 1920 by 1080, and you might have 720 screen, which is 720p. You want to pop these numbers in here. I've done a portrait perspective, so it is 1080 pixels along the bottom, 1920 pixels along the top. Now, if you want to make it widescreen, just swap those numbers around. We'll go 1920, 1080. There we go. We now have a widescreen camera. You can make it any way you want it to be. So don't feel like, oh, I'm stuck making portrait art. Don't worry. You don't have to be a troglodyte like me. You can make normal art, as in normal widescreen art. I'm going to pop that back to portraits just because it's easier for the demonstration purposes here. Now, I'm going to quickly show you a few other bits and bobs before we really get into how to move these characters around. So, this button right here, Render Properties. I'm going to properly show you this later, right at the end, because this is how we affect how. I'm trying to choose my words carefully here. This is how we affect the quality of our image. This is how we make things render faster. If you've ever used stud.io, you might find it takes a millennia to render things. It's similar kind of thing here. I'm going to talk you through how to use this in a bit. I'm going to talk you through what all the render engines are, talk you through what these numbers are, and I'm going to talk you through how to use performance enhancements to kind of speed things up for you as well. Output Properties. This is where you can choose what is your image going to be. What's the shape? Is it going to be portrait? Is it going to be widescreen? Is it going to be 4:5? What's the resolution? And then if you would like to go down, you can see it's an output. You can choose the file format. Again, we're going to come back to this right at the end, but this will be the type of file. Are you doing a picture? Is it a PNG? Is it a JPEG? And also, what's the color depth? Does it have any compression? Does it have RGB values, or is it RGB NA? And of course, those of you who've not done this before might think, what on earth is he talking about? Don't worry, I'll get through to that as well. Hopefully this stream can be as simple as possible for people, hence why it might be a bit longer. Going down, you can see view layer. This is for when you render things, you can turn on certain things to get you up and running. You don't really need to worry about it. I'll show you how to use it later, but honestly, I didn't use it for over a year. It's not that necessary, so don't worry. Scene. This is more for advanced things. I don't use it. There are people that do, but it's not relevant for what we're going to do. World settings. This is how we can change what our world looks like. I'm going to show you how the way I prefer to do it. Bionic Punk. I want to tell you that you're an amazing artist. You perfectly captured the promo images from G1. Thank you, Bionic Punk. That has been the goal. The goal is essentially been to try and replicate that style that Advanced, Christian Faber, and the rest of the team did, and just to give people more art. I always wanted to make art. I got frustrated there was no tutorials on it. I got frustrated I couldn't find many pieces of art that replicated that style, and I thought, well, if no one's going to do it, I guess I should. And here we are, over 2 years later. Many posters. I don't know how, I probably made like over 200 posters at this point. I don't know. I can't count. But yeah, it's been a long time coming, and thank you so much for your support. And hopefully this lesson makes more people artists in the community as well. So yeah, I'm going to go through the world settings in a bit as well. World settings is how to change what the world looks like. The world is what it sounds like. It's this backdrop. What does that backdrop look like? Does the backdrop emit light? Does it have a sun? Is it just nothing like it is currently? We're going to go through all of this. Camera, sorry, not camera. Collection properties, you don't need to worry about that. Object properties, I'm going to go through this in a little bit as well. Don't worry about this. Don't worry about this. And then here, this little icon here, it says camera at the moment. That's just because I've selected the camera. This changes the settings relevant to what you selected. So later when I show you how to make lights and stuff, that this button will no longer be, pardon me, be a camera. It will be a light. And likewise, if I select this object, notice that it's no longer a camera. It's now this symbol of an object. And so it will change dependent on the things you are selecting. And this also neatly brings me to how to select objects. I've selected Ghali's mask right here. You can select any object you want. Notice how they're all different pieces and parts. Big shout out to, I think it's Evernetics. I may be butchering that pronunciation, but he was the genius who decided to split the Termatter torso and limbs into more posable chunks. So now I could pose these characters to actually bend their limbs like the original art did, but of course the real pieces can't. So big shout out to him. This wouldn't be possible without him. He has done a humongous job of helping me get these models ready without even knowing. But notice that every time I select an object, you get this highlighted line around it to let you know, hey, I'm selecting this object. Down here, this button, this data button changes to let you know we're selecting an object now. And then this button, material. You don't actually need to worry about this because I set this up for you guys. But if you are more advanced, or you don't like what I did and you prefer to do it better, or maybe you're making a character of your own or want to change something, this is how you change the materials. And some of you may be thinking, what on earth are materials? You probably heard of textures. It's very similar. Materials are the way our things look. Right now it says Pahati brown. That's the color of this object here. If I remove this material by pressing this little minus symbol here, now there's no material. There's nothing there. It's just blank. It's just gonna like a blank white object. I'm gonna undo that because I don't want to do that. And we are back to our characters. So I've now gone through all these. Don't worry about this. Honestly, don't worry about this. I don't even probably understand this. It's not relevant at all. A big trick about actually doing art is not stressing out about the things that are confusing. Just focus on things you know and just get started. That's how I work. Barty got a cold bum. Yes, he did. So, we got our characters here. I've neatly organised them in collections. Collections are folders. Many different programs have their own terms. If you are a video editor, you might refer to them as bins. If you're a 3D artist, you might call them collections. If you're a Photoshop artist or just someone in data, you might call them just folders. They're the same thing. They're just folders to put things in, and you can categorize them in any way, shape, or form you want. Scene collection at the top, that's just the root. It's just where everything lives. Don't worry about it too much. I've made these myself. It's just how I organise and get my scenes up and running. You may have a different way to do it. Perfect. It's just the way I decide to work. I always split it into characters, environment, lighting, volumetrics, and camera. The reason I have a camera collection is sometimes maybe you want multiple cameras to get different perspectives and render different looks. Maybe you're making a film or an animation, perhaps. Sometimes you may want more than one camera, and so having a collection for cameras can be really handy. And I really do recommend keeping things in collections or folders. Organisation will make it so much easier for you to just get started, because the last thing you want is to get confused by your own coordination. I like to right click and colour my collections. That is a stellar idea, Lucy. Thank you so much. I don't do that because I'm a total noob. But I'm sure that there you go. You can just literally right click it and select your colours. I've never had to do it. I've never thought to do it. It makes total sense. So yeah, do what Lucy says. She seems like the OG around here. Yeah, colour code your folders if you are so inclined. Characters. So I've already set this up for you guys. You can see it says Borok and Toa Matter. And inside each folder, I've created subfolders for each character. The reason I've put them into little folders is maybe you want to turn some of them off. If you want to turn a folder off, this doesn't delete anything. It's not destructive. It's not going to remove anything. It's just turning it off, saying, I don't want to see this anymore. You've got two ways. You can either turn off this little eye symbol, hide in viewport. Notice I'm turning off Galloc here because I'm turning off the Galloc collection or folder. If you turn off the eye just means you won't see it in your Blender scene. It just means it's not going to be here. But when the moment you render it, it will be there. Why would you want to do that? Maybe something's really chugging your machine. It's really making it lag, and you can't do your work properly. And so you turn it off, but you want to make sure it's there for when you render. That's probably the most useful reason for turning off it by the little eye symbol. Likewise, if you want it in the viewport but not in the render for some reason, you can press this little camera symbol here. Same logic, it turns it off in the render, but it keeps Dear Galloc on in the scene. So it'll be here when we're doing our bits and bobs, but when we render, Galloc won't be visible. And if you just want to turn it off altogether, press the little tick. That turns them off altogether. Now, Galloc doesn't exist. And if I want to bring Galloc back, just press the tick again. And this goes for anything and everything. I've put everything into neat little folders, so I could turn off all the Borok if I wanted to, or just one or two, or I could turn off the Borok folder. There you go, all the Borok are gone, and you can start to see why it's useful to categorize things into folders. And again, you guys don't have to do this because I did it for you already. There you go. You can do the same thing with the Toa Matter. And again, if the viewport but not render could be useful for rulers and measuring and making sure things are lined up. Great shout. Yeah, that's absolutely a good idea. I'm sure someone can probably tell me how to actually make rulers inside Blender. I know there's a way. I've just never had to do it. But yeah, obviously, if you wanted to have something there as a reference, like a block, for example, to tell you where should your character be standing, then yeah, that's a great idea. You could absolutely use it for that purpose. Let's also show you how this works. So we're going to go to Dear Tahu right now. Let's say, hypothetically speaking, you want to turn off a part of H is the hotkey for hiding things when they are selecting the viewport. Yes, great idea. H is the hotkey. So if you want to hide something, you can press H. There you go. I've hidden just that item, just a mask on Tahu. Just Control Z that to undo it. By the way, I probably would forget to say is Control Z. It's the same obviously of every program, but Control Z will undo any change you make. And I'm pretty certain, there you go, Control Shift Z will redo any change you make. So obviously if you make a boo-boo and you think, oops, I didn't mean to do that, you can undo it at any point in time. But if I go back to where I was, I'm on the Tahu collection. I'm under the Tahu armature. Armature is just a technical term for skeleton. You see this blocky thing here? This is a skeleton. I'm going to go through this in a second. But that's where everything is connected to. So now we got all the parts beneath the skeleton I call Tahu. All these objects. Notice how as I click through this list on the right here, they select over here to show me which part I'm viewing. You don't need to know this necessarily, but it might help you better understand how Blender works and how it works. And obviously for those of you with experience of stud.io, maybe you might go, oh, this is starting to make a bit more sense. And you'll notice on some of these objects, it has a little triangle and then a number next to it. This lets you know if things are connected to that. So for example, I have connected a bunch of things to the head of Tahu. And if I then go through, I've got some eyes, I've got this stalk, got the mask there, all connected to the head. So if you wanted to go around and edit these in any way, shape or form, that's how you would do so. And they're all there for you to play with and break as much as you want, and the original file will be on Gumroad for free. If you mess it up badly, don't worry, download it again, completely free. Do with it as you wish. Hopefully this can let you just get messy, make mistakes, because that's how we learn. We learn through making mistakes. We learn through trying and realizing what went wrong or what worked. Let's actually get going into making things, look nice. So, Tahu. For this render, it would take way too long to do a render with all 12 characters. I'm just going to do a nice atmospheric kind of render with Tahu and Tanok, unless I'm going to get a bunch of requests to do a different one. Do let me know, but my idea was just to do a nice Tahu and Tanok render. Nice and simple, get you guys up and running. So for this purpose, I'm actually going to turn off all the other characters, just because they're not necessary. Whoever needed Parak and Nuvok were losers. Right, so now we're just left with Tanok and Tahu. If I want to move them around, my big recommendation is to select the armature, or in simple terms, the skeleton, the rig, the thing that makes the character move. That is this blocky kind of pyramid looking system here, and it's the same for Tahu. This is what we call a rig, or a armature, or a skeleton. Think of it like a real life skeleton. It's best to demonstrate it on Tahu. I'm just going to turn the camera off so I can see him a bit better. Notice how I've given Tahu a rig and it matches up with all the parts. The base of the rig, the way I've done it, is I've made this little piece here where my mouse is. I've made that the center of the rig, partly because it just made sense to me. The waist is being the center made sense. Maybe you find it's better to do it a different way. I'm going to pretend I know what's going on, jumping in 40 minutes late. Oscarbot, this will be saved online, so you can turn in. I'll watch the beginning as well, so it will all be there for. Maybe when I get time, 20 years from now, I'll cut it down into a more manageable format, but for now, it's going to be this long stream. It's the easiest way to get it out there. Back to where I was. Yes, so this is a rig. This is Tahu. The center of the rig is right here in the middle. It's this little waist bone here. Now, once you've selected a rig, you know you've selected it because it's got this orange outline around all the bits. What you want to do is press Control and Tab, and that will take you into pose mode. If that's not working, you can manually go into pose mode by this little button at the top left of the screen. At the moment, we are in what we call object mode. Object mode lets us move and place and rearrange objects in any way we see fit. But if you click down, you've got edit and pose mode. I will briefly go into edit mode just so if you accidentally end up there, you know what that is. But for now, we'll go to pose mode. Pose mode. Pose mode, as the name implies, lets you pose your characters. And it's especially important for rigs or skeletons like these. So you'll notice that some bones look a little different than others. I'm going to explain how that works in a moment. I'm going to be saying that a lot, aren't I? But this main bone here, because it's the root or the parent or the base of every other bone on Tahu's skeleton, if I move it, it will all stick together. And you might say, hold on a second, How on earth did you move it? Good question. Your friend, the G key, G on your keyboard. If you press G, think of it like G for grab, you are now able to move anything you select. Now I'm doing it in pose mode. If I undo that, come out of pose mode, and to do that, just to clarify, I did Control and Tab. Notice how as I'm pressing Control and Tab, I'm flicking between pose and object mode. So it's as much as you can be as free as you want to be. If I'm in object mode, same thing. I can press G, move it around. Maybe you think iconicstills, you've done a terrible job. His mask is too close, and you want to bring it, further away from him. Press G, move the mask. You can move anything you like. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend doing that. These are all set up, but it's there for you to play with. And maybe you want to make a mock. Maybe that's something you'd like to do with it. Let's go back to pose mode, back to our skeleton. So G moves our character around. Just to bear in mind, something to do with points of origin. That might sound really scary and complicated. Don't worry, it's actually really simple. Think of everything in Blender, you saw all these parts, they have a point of origin. That's kind of where they rotate from. That's their center of mass. At the moment, it's this little thing here. If I move it around, it's going to move around. A lot of battle damage on that mask. Time for an EP bath. Hey, personally, I like the scratched and worn look. It's my style. I like them looking a bit more real, like they actually are giant mechanical beings. Some people, like, I'm going to butcher his name, but in fact, let me find it right now. It's going to be... I just call him Philip. God, I'm going to really butcher this, aren't I? Carto Julhurt? I share him a lot on Instagram. Philip, I'll call him Philip. He's been in a lot of lovely renders. He makes them look like the actual toys. He uses plastic shaders. They are shiny, they are smooth, they look like the toys. And if that's what you want to do, absolutely that's available for you. But for me, I like to do the scratched and weathered look to make them look a bit more like they actually are characters who actually do exist in the lore. That's just the way I see these guys. Back to what I was saying, though, about moving the things around and moving this rig. Notice that there's this orange dot. This orange dot is the center of mass. It's our origin. Technically, it's still there. And that's because in pose mode, if I go back to object mode, and I select this rig, the center of this is still that little dot. So if I now rotate it, it's rotating around the dot. So if you ever get confused, that's why. Don't worry, because you don't actually need to worry about it. Oh, don't do that. You don't actually need to worry about it because in pose mode, you're going to be moving your character how you see fit, so you won't really be moving them around in object mode like so. So I've shown you how to move them around in 3D space. You can move them up and down, left and right. I can move them forward and backwards. I can move them all around. If I decide that I have moved them into a position and I think, you know what, that was a mistake. I want to undo its position and send it right back to the start. Alt. You want to press the Alt key and then G. Alt and G will reset the position of your character. And it's having a bit of a glitch there. I would ignore that because it seems to fix itself instantaneously. But Alt and G will reset the position of the thing you're selecting. Likewise, if you want to rotate something, rather than pressing G, as you may guess, you can press the R key. R will rotate it, and you can see that things have changed. My mouse is now these two little arrows. There's this dotted line between, and the closer I am to the object center, the more fast, I guess you could describe it, I can rotate my character. Tahu seems to be a bit unsure of himself these days. And likewise, if you go really far away, you can be really refined with how much you rotate your character. And it doesn't just have to be side to side. You can rotate him in any way, shape or form. And you may notice that there is this kind of gizmo If you are moving something and right click it, it will also go back to the original position. Not me doing this all the time accidentally. Okay, can shout. Yes. So you've got these gizmo, this kind of circular object with these 3 coloured lines, this blue, red, and green line. These are your axes. You can rotate them along an axis. So if I click and drag on the green line, I can rotate it along this axis, or I could do this axis, or I could do the blue one for this axis. And you can do it in any way you like. And if you think, oh god, this just looks terrible, remember, Alt and R. Ta-da! We're back to our normal position. Now, everything I've shown you there can be applied to every single part of this character. Notice I got all these bones for all the different joints. You got your hip. Technically, these are the hips, but you got your hips because they connect these little hand joints. The top part of the leg, the bottom part of the leg, the foot, the arm, the hands, the upper arm, so on and so forth. They're all there and they can all be freely moved. Obviously, be conservative with how you move them because you might find you break the pieces and it doesn't quite look how it should. And I'm going to demonstrate that for you. Before we do, however, you'll notice some of the bones are different colours. They are green. That is because I've done a kind of cool techie thing. It's actually not that exciting, but for those of you who've never done this before, it's going to seem like magic. To get pistons working in Blender, notice you've got these pistons here. I have created these bones that will follow one another. So if I go to the leg, for example, it seems to have broken on here, but if I go to the leg and I bend the leg, notice that the piston, I'm just going to do that, as you can see, the piston follows. So it actually moves with it. This is all set up for you. You don't have to worry about it. It's all automatic. There's nothing to do other than just get using it. But that's why some bones are green and some bones are grey. And just to reference, I did go over this at the beginning, but the way I turned off the bones just to see them, I just tapped this little bone at the top here, show overlays, ta-da, I removed them, and now I can move the characters around. While I'm here, just to clarify, again, some people didn't hear earlier, I have used custom parts for these characters, as I do in all my renders, because I personally think they look better, and also gives them more flexibility. And because of that, it's allowed me to add a bit of colour variation to the characters, such as these sections on Tahu's arms, for example, or the bottom of his legs, because I think it breaks up the colour a bit. If you think, Iconic Stills, you're an absolute idiot, I want to go back to how it looks in the set, you can do that. It's exactly your choice. You can select the come out of object mode. You can select the parts, like I've selected here. And you can go down to the material tab, which is this one over here on the right. You can see I'm selecting with my mouse. Click on that. At the moment, it says Tahu Red. If you want to change it to his orange, I've already got that set up for you. Just press this little drop down, select Tahu Orange. Ta-da! It will now be orange. I'm going to leave it red because I'm not a monster, but that's how you can change it if you so wish. Right, and a 10-year-old just screamed excitedly, that's exactly what I wanted back then. Yes, exactly, I think we all did. If they made the sets where the arms moved like that today, I think we'd all be buying copies pretty much yesterday, to be honest. So, I've gone over how Tahu works. I'm going to very, very quickly go over what I went again. Notice how I can move all parts of Tahu because of the lovely pack by Evernetics. I can move his body in these positions. I can move his leg. I can go into this view, bring his leg. Grab the red one, bring his leg forwards, bring his upper leg up, bring his upper leg down. Notice how I'm very quickly making a pose and how easy it is to do that. This takes seconds. It's really not that hard at all. So don't be put off by maybe it looks confusing. Look how quick it is. It's not that complicated at all. And if you got confused, watch this video and repeat. You'll get there eventually. And the other good thing is the head can also move. Obviously, that's not a pose we're going to go with, but you can see how easy it is to move our character around. And this is all preset for you guys. I'm going to just select all of it by pressing the A key. And I'm going to go Alt-R to undo the rotation. Not me wanting to plug him into Mixer and make him dance. Be my guest. I'd love to see it. Right, you can also find the database for all the color RGB codes on LEGO users to use in Blender. Yes, very, very, very good shout out by Sokuru. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. When I actually set this up, I actually used the color codes directly from LEGO themselves. You can get them from LEGO, or you can go to the site which I did, which is the one Glaucon has in his tutorial, which is linked in the description, rebrickable.com. You go to rebrickable.com. I'm actually going to grab my tab, and I'm going to go oh, come on. There you go, rebrickable.com. And then from here, if I type in Tahu, for example, you got some mocks, but if you go down, he says, it's actually not showing up for once. There you go, Tahu Mini CD. Ta-da! There is Tahu. And you go to inventory, you've got all the parts here. So if you select his mask, for example, his mask, where is it? I think I'm just being blind. Usually it just comes up. Oh, there you go. If you hover your mouse over it, it says in orange. And then this is in red. So you can actually go to part colors. And then from here, you can type in red, for example. And this is the actual red that LEGO uses. So it'll be the exact correct color. So if you go to red, there it is. The color code is this here, C91A09. And if you copy that, go to the material. You see it says color here. Tap that. Go to hex. Notice how it's exactly the same because I've just copied and pasted the color code. So it's the exact same one that LEGO uses. Obviously, if you want to change it, be my guest. Maybe make him have dark colors like Vikama and make him edgy. It's entirely your choice. The world is your oyster. Just gonna have a quick drink. Blech. God, I need to go better soon. Right. Same thing with the Baroque. I'm not going to spend too long on it. By the way, how did I quickly zip over to the Baroque? When you select something, notice how I'm selecting the rigs for Tahu and the Baroque. If you want to center your camera on that object, press the full stop key on your keyboard. It will center on the object. So now if I rotate the camera, it will be, orbiting this item. Same thing with the Baroque. I can control and tab, go into pose mode. I've already put in a ball because I thought that quite worked. I think if I do that, there we go. If you press Alt and R, there you go. They'll be standing. So it's your choice how you want to do it. You can have him standing like he's a 5-year-old going into his parents' room at night asking for a nice cup of hot chocolate, or put him in a ball ready to roll. It's entirely your choice. Now, this rig is not perfect. There are people significantly better than me in the community, such as Frambo and Olu, who could do far, far superior rigs. So if you want better rigging skills, or even someone like AJ in the community, Agitation, I believe he goes by online, talk to one of them. They will be able to talk to you about rigs far better than I can. These are just basic rigs to get you guys up and running. It's what I use for almost all my work. Sakura, I jump straight into rigging. There is a way to use a mesh and go into the middle and make it move closer. Yes, there is. I'm not going to go over that because Glaucon Media has done an incredible tutorial on how to do that, and it would just waste time on an already long stream. So if you are interested in doing that, I'd recommend going to Glaucon's video that's in the description. And he very, very, very carefully explains how to set up a character in Blender by importing from stud.io and how to rig them and even how to make materials. So I'd definitely recommend checking out that, that video. But the way I have set this rig up is that technically he's all posable. So for example, if you want to open the lid... Ooh, ta-da! You can open the lid. And if you want to move the head, move the head, move the neck, move the neck. And I've added a brief little track there. It's not perfect because it's just really basic, but it will get you up and running pretty quickly. And so you could very easily protrude the head out like that. Maybe you want him to throw his crana, open the lid. Now throw that forwards and notice how the crana's there, ready to fly. That's entirely up to you. So, I've now shown you the basics of how to get around Blender, how to use Blender, how to use a rig, how to use a skeleton, and how to very basically access the materials if need be. I'm going to move on to the next portion, which is actually making the art now. But before I do, obviously I know this is delayed a little bit, so I will carry on for a little bit beforehand. If anyone has questions of what they want to know of like these basics before I get into the artsy fartsy kind of stuff, let me know. Because I want this to be an opportunity where if people have questions, they get them answered, and I can actually help you guys out. Because if you don't ask now, you may never know. What I just did there, if you want to move something along an axis, so it only moves side to side on the x-axis, or maybe back and forwards on the y-axis, or maybe up and down on the z-axis. Really simple how to do. What you want to do is press the G key, and then the key on your keyboard for the axis. So X, if I press X, see that line, that pink line appears. That means he will now move on the x-axis. Y, he'll move on the y-axis, and the same with Z. Z moves him on the z-axis. Same for anything. If you are in pose mode and you want to move something across those axes, you can do the same there. It is entirely up to you. Right, let's get started. I want to make super basic poster, just to make sure. If you wanted the corner actually flying, that would be the G grab key in object mode. Yes, Matthew, you're correct. You're absolutely correct. So if I go to my rig of the Baroque again, and I open up the lid, and I want the Karana to fly, I can't move the Karana like this because the Karana is not part of the rig. It's just attached to the Baroque. If I want to move it, I'll come out of pose mode, back to object mode, select the Karana, and now I can move it. So of course you can then move it to a position that you think works well for the picture you're trying to make. Or if you're trying to do an animation, of course you could, animate that, but I'm not going to go through animation. That's a whole other kettle of fish that people way more skilled than me can go over. Ba-ba-ba-ba-bam. Right, so let's start started with a poster. Now, I did have a very vague reference of what I wanted to make. I'm not going to copy it. I'm just using it as inspiration. I'm going to try and riff off this. I might not end up with this. I might end up with something completely different, and that's fine. This is art. We just keep trying things and see what works. But we're just going to see what happens, which is how a lot of my art works, to be honest. This is a picture from the trading card games. A rare resource of inspiration for me, I find. In fact, one of my posters was a direct rip-off of one of these. So if you ever want inspiration, check out the trading cards. Very underseen. Right, so I'm just bringing that to the side. Baroque popping a squat in that picture. Yeah, he is. It looks like he really needs to go to the toilet. For Americans, that is the lavatory. Do you call it the lavatory over there? Toilet's such a British colloquialism. So for this poster, I am first and foremost going to set up my camera. This is a camera here. This kind of triangle pyramid looking thing. This camera lets us see the scene. Obvious, but it needs to be said. The big arrow at the top there indicates what side is up, because of course if you may accidentally have it this way round, you might think, why is my picture upside down? It's because you got the camera upside down. So you can just quickly check that from here. And again, I'm just using the number pad to quickly zip around my perspective so I can see it a bit better. I never do it over here. I always I'm selected over here. By select, I'm just clicking on this screen. Now anything I do is relevant here. It's not going to move it over here. That way I can see what my poster is going to look like over here, and I can edit everything in real time over here. So, looking at the art, it looks kind of like the camera's looking up. Tahu's from behind, he's quite close to the lens, and then in the top right hand portion of the frame you've got the Baroque. We're going to kind of work with that as a base and work from there. So, what I'm going to do, I'm going to rotate my camera a bit. It doesn't need to be exact. 50 millimeters is the focal length. For those of you who understand cameras, that's how wide the lens is. A lower number makes the camera wider, kind of like a fisheye lens, if you guys know what that is. And a higher number makes the camera more narrow. Really good at seeing things that are a bit more flat, really good for close-ups, for example. And then if you want a wide shot, maybe you go for something like 35. Usually the numbers people go for are 35, 50, 85, 105, I think it is. This is what most people with actual lenses will use. But because we're on Blender, you can use any number you like, so don't feel too concerned if you want to choose 36mm. It's up to you. For this, I think we'll go 35. See how that works out. And I'll bring my camera in a bit closer to the scene. And at this point, I'm just blocking things out. I'm not really posing yet. I'm just getting things into the perspective I want them to be. I'm going to bring Tahu close to the camera. He's facing the wrong way, so I'm going to rotate him around. If you want to be exact, when you are moving something, rotating or moving with the R key or the G key, hold down Control on your keyboard and then move your mouse. You'll notice it will snap like dum, 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 dum. Just means it can be exact if you want them to be exactly 180 degrees turned. Obviously, we may not want that. We may want him slightly turned in a different perspective, but we'll work this out later. I think that works for now. Bring him down. I think that works. And then for our bow rock, bring him into the scene, rotate him a bit, and bring him up a bit. And it's a different aspect ratio in my source. Notice how this is more of a 5:6 aspect ratio, I want to say. No, more like 5:3 or 5:4. And then this is a much thinner aspect ratio of 16:9, so things aren't going to be exact, and I'm not trying to replicate it exactly anyway. It's just there for a reference. So I'm going to kind of get them a bit like that. I think I'm thinking that. And of course, you don't actually need to keep them this size. If you think that you've got them in the correct position, but it looks wrong and you want the bow rock to be more imposing, maybe you want them to be smaller to imply they're further away, or maybe you want them to be bigger, or maybe you want Tahu to be bigger, or maybe you just want a portion of him to be bigger for perspectives use. He's just hovering menacingly there. Yes, he is. You can do that at any point, and the way you can do that is just by pressing S on your keyboard. If you press S and then drag your mouse, you can scale him up, and all of a sudden Tahu's going to have a really bad time fighting this bow rock. And of course, if you want to undo that, Control Z, scale him up, Alt S brings it back to a different scale. I'm just going to undo it because I actually quite like him at that scale. I don't think it's too bad. Plus, you don't want the bow rock to take up too much of the screen. So I've kind of got them in the rough positions I want them to be. I may, fiddle with this a bit more later. But before I start marrying myself to certain ideas, I want to make sure that I am following what's known as the rule of thirds. Now, you don't have to follow the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is a guide for a reason, or as they say, is it Barbosa who says it in Pirates of the Caribbean? Pirates Code is more like a set of guidelines. Same thing here. You don't have to follow it religiously. The rule of thirds is just there to help you. If you want to break the rule of thirds and place characters in different positions, that's entirely your choice. There's a great example from Luca going around. Oh yeah, perfect. Yeah. I actually think I know the one you're referring to, Lucy. There's a I don't know if I can get it up right now, but there's a lovely shot of behind the scenes and Lucas showing a shot from that film, but the camera's at a different perspective, and you can see that they've actually scaled up parts of the characters, like I think it might be the head or something, and they've made it, they've just dragged it closer to the camera, which isn't realistic, to get the perspective they want, to make it more interesting. So from the camera's perspective, it looks really cool, but if you move the camera, it just breaks, and that's fine. There's actually a terminology for that I'm not aware of, but that's how I work. It just needs to look good in the camera. It does not need to look good outside the camera. Most of my renders look like arse outside the camera, and that's fine. The point is to make sure that you're happy with your shot in camera, because that's all people are going to see. All they're going to see is your render. It doesn't matter if it doesn't look good from side on. No one's going to notice, so don't worry too much. That is a complaint I see frequently. People trying to make it proper realistic, and you don't need to. You just need to get the render good. You don't need to get the world good. So, rule of thirds. I'm selecting my camera here, over here, on the right-hand side of the screen, just to give people a moment. Selecting my camera, and I'm going down. And I can select on viewport display here. By the way, if you don't see this, it's because I'm selecting the camera icon here, the data properties for the camera, viewport display, and you can see where it says composition data. And there's a lovely tick box here for thirds. Tap on thirds, and you can't see anything, and that is because we turned them off. You want to tap on show overlays. See this button here, show overlays. You can now see the thirds, but we get all these bones back. So you actually click this little tick box, turn off the bones, And let's also turn off the 3D cursor. That's what this little thing here is. It's the 3D cursor. You don't really need to worry about it at this point. We're going to take that off, and there we go. We have our lovely rule of thirds. Rule of thirds are really designed for widescreen. They're not really designed for portrait, but they're still useful to help you understand the position of your characters and the position of where these characters sit in 3D space. So now I've got them in the rough space. I want to start doing the environment. And you can do this in any way you want. You can do poses first, then environment, or you can do environment and then poses. I kind of flip-flop between the two. There's no rule. It's not hard and fast. You can do what you like. I'm going to do the environment. Sometimes people like to block it out with actual blocks first if you've got a really complicated environment. This isn't going to be that complicated. I want to keep it really simple so anyone can do this. So I'm just going to go straight from Blender Kit, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So, big tip, big tip, make sure environment's selected. This little folder or collection here. Iconic breaking his own rule and not starting with the environment. Yes. Yeah, you want to click the environment box here. And this means that when I start to bring things into the scene from Blender Kit, they will automatically be organized in the environment collection. And give me 2 seconds. I'm just going to close the window because I'm a little chilly. Blimey, that's cold. Oh. Right, I'm back. I don't even know why I'm wearing headphones. I'm not listening to anything. Yeah, I'm not used to blooms or even shaping my own parts. Just straight up iconic chills. Thanks. Just straight up meshes and rigging. I haven't messed with anything else, but I only have 5 days experience. Hey, 5 days is better than 1. You know, I started with Blender literally knowing nothing, and my first render was so pants, but we all got there. Matthew, wrong folder in Blender is like wrong layer. Yes, good shout, Matthew. Wrong folder in Blender is like the wrong folder in GIMP or Photoshop. If you start working, we're not putting things in the right folder, you're going to have a hell of a time putting things back. So, looking at our reference pick, this is pretty good because it's mainly rocks, and that's what Blender Kit's great for. Rocks. There are so many rocks in Blender Kit. It's obscene. So, if we want to make a little mound like this, we're going to search for that in Blender. So, Blender Kit up the top here, we are selecting on the model selection on Blender Kit. It says tree. I'm going to change this to, let's change this to ground actually first and see what we can grab. See what is there for us. Have I selected free first? I have. None of that's really piquing my interest. There's usually some ones that pop out. Oh, I put ground, not rather than ground. Ground. There we go. So you got this lovely one. I love this. I use this all the time. I might even use it now. That's quite high poly. I wouldn't do that. These are great. I might use that. I might use this. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to click and drag. Don't worry if it's kind of in the wrong place. We're going to fix this all in a minute. It says looking for assets. If this breaks, we will find an alternative because it could break. But it's now just looking for it online and then it should download it. He says, maybe my internet's breaking. Who knows? Oh, Damon's not responding. Add-on will not work apparently. Let's try a different one. And then double check if it's my Blender or if it is just a restart that needs happening. It might be my Blender's broken, which is an easy fix. You just need to turn it off and on. Oh, there we go. It was just having a moment. So we'll go for this. Notice how on the viewport over here, it kind of looks a bit weird. The floor is cutting through our characters. One of us got to hold the door open so it can come in. Thank you, Lucy. That will be super handy if you could. Let's drag this down. And again, I'm using all the tools and the skills I've talked to you guys earlier about. I'm using G to move things. I'm pressing Z on the keyboard to go down. this is too big, so I want to scale it down, also to make it look a bit less blocky. So I'm pressing S on the keyboard to scale it down. Tahoe getting buried by the Tannock, yes. And so you don't even, because we can't see Tahoe's feet in the render, you can actually break it. You can have the floor higher up if you want to, so it looks better in the render. That's what's most important. And it doesn't even need to be flat. You could rotate it a bit if you wanted to as well. You could rotate it like this. I'm going to kind of do that. I think that works. You could rotate it a bit as well. I actually think it works best like that. So that's very quickly popping that down. And a big tip I can give, I've seen this in some other renders, is bear in mind about consistency. Now, obviously, if you're using these Bionicle parts, they're quite detailed. The community's worked really hard on making them, quite accurate and or very accurate in the case of some parts. And they've got lots of detail to them, and the materials of themselves also have loads of details. And there's all this finer detail in these characters. But if your environment just looks flat, if it just looks barren, if it clearly looks pixelated or clearly looks like a texture that's stretched out and blown up, it's not going to look right. So you need to bear that in mind. Something I do with all my renders, I try to bear this in mind. So here, I can kind of see it. And so I'd scale it down. Because when you scale something down, you're making it smaller and you're making those inconsistencies less visible. That looks better already. And bear in mind, after compositing and stuff, it's going to look a whole lot better. So I think I'm quite happy with that. Now, I'm going to briefly show you edit mode. You don't need to do this. You really don't. So don't feel compelled to do it. But edit mode can help you out. Tap tab on an object. So I've clicked it and I tapped tab. And if you've got a weak computer, it might cry for help. And this is edit mode. You can see all the polygons. What about UV unwrapping? You can UV unwrap something, of course, if you want to. You don't need to UV unwrap these models from Blender Kit because they are already UV unwrapped. If you're adding a material onto an object you've made, like if you've made like a platform for your character to sit on, then you can do UV unwrapping. That's not something I'm going to go through in this tutorial. It's not that relevant for what we're doing. We're focusing on the art here. But yeah, absolutely. If you are making something yourself, then UV wrapping is something that's very critical. And there are great tutorials online on how to do that. But this is how we can use edit mode to our advantage. So you can see all these polygons here. And we're on face mode currently. I'm going to go to vertice mode. Vertice mode. Yes, Lacey, yes. I despise UV unwrapping. Vertices are the points between polygons. You can see all these triangles here because they're working of polys or tris, or however, I think it's like, is it n-gons? Is that a term people use? You can tell I don't really do that kind of stuff. Yes, Lee, you do get used to it. A vertice is the point of each polygon. At the top left, you can go to edge mode. That is the line of each polygon. And then the face is a polygon itself. So if I can select this, you can select each individual polygon. For what we're going to do, it doesn't really matter. But what I'm going to show you is how you can manipulate an object to kind of bend it to your will, if you so wish. So for Tannock, I'm just going to select these. Notice how I'm clicking and dragging. I'm making a little box. And notice how I'm selecting a box directly beneath Tannock here. And what you want is to press this circle button at the top, proportional editing. If you tap that, I usually leave on smooth. You can change it to what you like. I'll have to come back to this video to practice more on some UV. Yes, absolutely do. Mix and match the learning. If you press G with proportional editing on, that's what this little circle at the top does. It might be quite hard to see, and I don't want to move my mouse, but you'll notice there's this very large ring around the screen. And if I scroll with my mouse wheel, that ring gets bigger or smaller. And what we are doing is we are increasing the, I don't know how to describe this really simply, we are increasing its area of influence. If I unselect, think about, we selected this and then a ring appears around it. And the more we scroll our scroll wheel, the wider an area those vertices have an impact on. What does this mean? It's probably better to show you. So now if I go G, make it about that big, let's say, and wiggly ground, yes. And I press G and Z, and look at that, we can make a mound. And even as you're doing it, you can increase the size. So you can increase it like so. And I can even do one more. I can make it go to the side. I can rotate it a bit. I could then scale it down a bit more and then go up. Very quickly, look at that. We very quickly made a mound. That took like, what, 5 seconds? And we're not even finished. We aren't even finished. So what we're going to do is add to this. This is our base. This is where everything lives. God. And I'm now going to start to add some rocks. Let's go to rocks. Rocks are the bee's knees, I find. You get a good collection of rocks and you are set. Well, that's quite nice. So I'm going to bring some more rocks in. Notice how I'm selected on environment. Just to make sure I selected on environment. And I'm going to bring in a handful. Bring in that. There you go. We've got one, we've got two. I quite like that. This one's quite nice. And you can just pick as many or as little as you like. That'll do, donkey. That'll do. Yes, that'll do. Oh, these are quite nice. Oh, I quite like that one, actually. What about that? That one's nice. This is where you get carried away and you just see all the wonderful things people have made. I think I'll get that. Oh, come on. You can go overboard. I think I'm going to keep this nice and simple. I think that works. Some models, when you bring them in, you might notice they got these like kind of lines sticking out of them. The line is what we call an empty. An empty is, it's essentially what it says. It's an empty thing, but what it is it's like an origin point, so you can control your object without moving the object yourself. Now, someone's going to tell me heresy what I'm about to do, but I don't like empties. So what I'll do is I'll unparent this from the empty, and to do that, select the object, Alt and then P. Clear parent and keep transformation. What this means is it's going to forget who its parent is. Parent is just a technical term for the thing it is attached to, but it means it won't move around. And now I'm going to delete the empty, and it's made 2 of them for some reason. Why is it made? Oh my god, why are there so many? There we go. I don't know, that single model seemed to have a bit of an issue. So we now have this wonderful model. I'm going to scale it down a bit, move it to where I want it to be, and I'm just going to start to, I call this painting. There is probably an actual technical term for this, but I call it painting. Move them out the way briefly. Someone said, you're orphaning it, it felt lonely. Well, it's going to feel more lonely in a second because I'm about to rip it, part of it away. Different LEDs, level. Oh, thank you, Lucy. This is, you should be doing this lesson, not me, quite frankly. You got a wealth of experience and skills. Right, this model's pretty high poly. I'm not going to bother around meddling with that too much. So I'm going to really just kind of mix and match. There is a term for what I'm about to do. Although because I'm half ill, I forget the term. It's like when you kit bashing. That's it. I'm essentially kit bashing. I'm essentially smashing bits and bobs together and getting something better from it. And so this rock kind of looks alright there. We're kind of getting something nice. I want to bring it in a bit. Bring it up like that. Don't worry too much that we can see bits there. We're going to fix this later. I think I might rotate it. What looks better? Oh, that's quite nice. Oh, that's quite nice at all. Do that. And then I'm going to go to edit mode. And I'm just going to proportionally edit. And my computer might crash. I hope it doesn't. I'm just going to move these out of the way. I'm just moving these down. And the way I did that, I just selected the vertices. And I just said, you know what? We don't need them. Hide them. That's all we need. Just hide them. There we go. Very simply, I have very quickly merged these 2 models together. They look not the same. That's fine. We're going to fix this later. We're going to use the power of lighting and compositing to fix it. We have a few more rocks. I'm going to play with these a bit. So let's bring a rock in, scale it down, bring it in. This is just painting. This is the fun part. This is where you just take bits and bobs, like Lego, essentially. You're just moving it around, making a set, thinking what looks right, what composites well. I think I spoke to a few people about this privately. I run off the logic of big, middle, and small. Actually, there's a wonderful TED talk on it, or GDC talk, I should say, by all people, the developers of Breath of the Wild. There was this train of thought that when you are creating a landscape, you want to balance things out with big things, middle things, and small things. You want things that are large. I wish Bob Ross learned us to teach Blender. I wish too. I'd probably be much better if he could teach Blender, to be honest. Yeah, as I say, there's this logic of big, little, small, big, middle, small, and the idea is you've got big things, and then you complement it with middle things, and then you complement it with tiny things. And so you've got the big things, in this case it's our characters, and maybe large chunks of land, and then you complement it with medium-sized rocks and medium-sized foliage. And then you complement that even further with tiny things like little pebbles or little plumes of grass or God knows what else. And so you can really start to play with these things. I'm going to scale this down, move it up. You don't need to be exact with this. I'm just really moving these things around in space to get them looking a bit nice on camera. That's quite nice. And if I want to duplicate an object, I probably should have said this earlier. If you want to duplicate something, if you want something to appear multiple times, you want many of the same rock, you can do that very easily. You can either press Shift and D, like some kind of basic, or you can press Alt and D. Alt and D is a little secret, known only by select few, handed down through generations. Alt and D, for those of you who don't know, it will duplicate the object, but it's not duplicating all the data. It's not making two of the same material, and it's not making two of all the polys and everything in there. It's essentially a clone. It follows what the original does. So if I edit this original, this one will change as well. But for the purposes of what we're doing, it's perfect. I'm just gonna scale it down, rotate it around. You can kind of make it in any way, shape, or form. I know this session is going to go on for too long if I spend too long on this, so I'm not going to make this environment too obscene. I'm kind of focusing on one tiny rock. I should probably get a move on. Let's bring this rock over, scale that down. God, where's my reference? There it is. I lost it for a second. Rotate it around. By the way, if your rotation looks a bit odd and if it's not rotating with the object, you see these coloured circles that allow you to rotate the thing. It's because you're on default on orientation at the top left of the screen. You want to make sure you're on local. And all I'm doing is just painting. I'm just making things look mighty nice. I really do sound like Bob Ross now, don't I? Scale that down. Let's add in some more stuff. In fact, yeah, let's add in some more stuff. Rocks. And then we'll go on to poses as well, lest I lose the energy to carry on. Let's go with... Ooh, that's quite nice. Let's go with that. I haven't said, happy little accident yet, can't be Bob Ross. Well, there are no accidents when I'm involved, I'll tell you that much. I jest. Let's do this. And what I'm doing here is I'm using another scan to kind of complement the detail. I'm overlaying it. Kind of merges with the other one. It's not technical. I'm literally just putting something on top of another thing. So there's nothing really too complicated about it. It's just to kind of give off the perspective of there's more detail than there actually is. And don't worry too much about how certain things look, because when you render you'll start to see with lighting and shadows and whatnot, it kind of ends up looking quite alright in the end anyway. I'm not going to spend too much longer on the environment, otherwise we'll be here forever, so I'll just add a few more bits and bobs in. Yep, let's add that rock in. Scale it down. Move it about there. Oh, move it about there. Do another one here. scale it up. And I'm just kind of painting. It's the best way to describe it, to be honest. Also trying to get rid of blank spots. You'll notice that if you look at it in terms of perspective, if I turn off my characters for a second, if I just look at this environment and I move this rock away, there's just this awkward little thing here. So I'm just trying to fill it. I think that works quite nicely. And then to just bulk it out a bit, I add a few more rocks around here, and then I think we might be golden on that, because I don't want to complicate this too much. So let's get... Oh, that's a nice rock. Let's go with that. I feel like a donkey. I think someone's already said it. That's a nice boulder. That's what I sound like. Someone who just stares at rocks and goes, ooh, that'll do. Let's go with that. Scale it down. And then we'll just add a few more, and then we'll get onto the fun part of posing. Notice I'm just duplicating the same rocks. I think I said online recently that I really just reuse the same rocks all the time, because no one's looking at a render going, I was going to enjoy this render, but I'll be honest, I noticed you're using the same rock in every single one. No one notices. And if you have noticed, you're lying. No one's noticed. Let's just move them in. I think that works. I think that works. Now, little quick tip. You don't need to do this bit. I do it just for a bit of consistency. These rocks are all different colours. They'll kind of look the same once you add some lighting and perspective in there. But to speed things up a little bit, just to make it a little consistent, I'm going to make them all very similar. And it's mainly these orange rocks I'm going to fix. And so to do that, I'm going to make a new window. And in this new window, I'm going to click on this button at the top left, change it from 3D viewport to Shader Editor. Shader Editor, you don't need to worry about too much, but it's just a little summon. This lets you change the way the materials on the things look. At the moment, if I zoom in on the rock, this is how it looks. But for this, I'm going to go to Shift and A, and I'm going to go in for RGB curves. There's probably a better way to do this, but that's how I like to roll. RGB curves, give it a moment to rethink. And then from here, I'm just going to go to C. I actually don't know what C stands for. Another program is it's L for luminance. I don't know what... Is it chroma? C for chroma? Chroma's colour though, so I don't know what C stands for. But I'm just going to bring it down a bit, make it a bit darker. And maybe bring the red down a bit. That's looking better already. And then I'll go to... And notice how, because I Alt-D'd them, as in I used Alt-D to make duplicates, when I changed one, I changed all of them. Same thing on this one. I'm going to go to this rock. I'm just very quickly adding some curves, and what I'm doing is I'm putting them between the texture that goes into base color on a principled BSDF. So those of you who want to come back to this at a later date and trying to follow along, that's what I'm doing. What I'm doing is I'm changing the color of the texture before it goes into this thing. Don't worry about what it is. That lets it show an image on your screen. Here again, bring this down a bit. That maybe add a bit of red. No, remove the red. Oh, that looks quite nice. Yeah, that works. Same thing here. Select this rock. Shift A, RGB, curves, slap it there. And then I'm just going to bring this down a bit. Remove some of the red. That's looking a lot better already. And I'll do the same with the ground textures as well. For reference, because I know I would be annoyed if no one told me, how I'm very quickly bringing up these RGB curves. I'm pressing Shift and A. I will show you this in a moment. You can see it kind of updating here. That's the color of the ground. Let's just add a bit of color. Oh, I've added in blue. Remove blue. I want to add in a bit of green. Just a smidge. That works. So let's go to the last one, or second to last one. So what I'm doing is I'm pressing Shift and A, brings up this little search bar, type in RGB, and you can then go to curves, slap it in, bring it much down, and then the last one, RGB curves, slap that in there. Notice how just adding a little, or removing, I should say, a little bit of colour really does wonders. I think that works. That's good enough. That's good enough for now. Let's turn on our characters again. Right, let's pose them now. So I'm gonna get rid of this. Get rid of Blender Kit because we don't need that anymore. And let's get our characters working. So I selected the rig, Control Tab. I'm into pose mode. Let's have a look at Tahu. I want him looking at the character, so I'm going to rotate him down a bit. He's leaning into an action because he's getting ready to fight. I always add a bit of rotation to the waist just because it makes it look a bit more interesting. If you don't add rotation, it can look a bit static, like you've just put a piece there. Adding in even small variations of movement can give life to something that originally doesn't have some life. I'm now going to move his head. I usually do the head as one of the first things because then I know where he's looking at and then I can match his pose to the rest of it. And of course, while this technically is correct because he's looking at the Tannock, I actually want to move it so he's looking to the side a bit. Because if you look at the reference picture, this doesn't make sense. He's not looking at the Tannock, he's looking at his sword. He's looking all the way over here. He's not making eye contact with the Balrog, but artistically, it's done that way so we can see more of his face or more of his mask. And this is about trying to make sure our poster is visually interesting rather than being correct. Makes sense since the episode root and skeleton, also the root motion of the character. Yes, great point, Lucy, as always. If I had gold stars, you'd be getting them. So I think that works quite well. For Tahu now, I'm going to try and get rid of this shoulder out of the way of his mask, so it doesn't, get in the way so much. And there's no real science to this. Just do what you think works best. I think that, and then essentially what I'm doing now is just rotating the arm. And I always do it on the axes. I don't click off the axes because otherwise it can get a bit messy. I always click on one of these lines. And now I'm just going to get the arm in a position. And I might not be happy with this. I might change this. In fact, I think I might change this as well. I think that's better, much better, because now his arm is closer to the camera. It might not be much, but because the lens is wide and because the lens is quite close to Tahu, the closer you make things to the lens, the larger they appear, which makes him seem more dynamic. You're playing with depth. You're giving the character perspective, and you're giving the audience perspective as well, because they aren't looking at a flat image. They're looking at something which has action going on at multiple points of depth. I know that might sound kind of wishy-washy, but it is important to make sure that it's not just straight on. Things look like they are further apart. And this will soon pop when we start to add lighting as well. God. Right. So now we can't really see the rest of the Tahu too much, so we're just going to focus on this leg here. And we can't actually see the leg in the reference image. I want to include it because I think it works quite well. So I'm going to just move it into a position that I think makes sense. And notice how he's clipping through the floor, in which case I just need to, work through it or hide it. It's up to you. What do you think works best? In this instance, I think it works better to hide it. So I'll just kind of hide it like that. Do that. Maybe rotate the leg a bit just so it's not flush with the hip, so it feels like they are at joints, they're actually moving. So now if you look at it, this is rotating slightly this way to the left, but this piece is rotating slightly to the right. It just makes it feel like you've actually moved these characters around. I think that's half bad. As in, I don't think that's half bad, sorry. I might further refine it a bit just to see if I can better get a pose out of him. Yeah, this is the finicky bit where you really just got to play with it and see what works best. I think that works. You're not always going to get it perfect because of perspective and time, and maybe your vision doesn't quite translate to screen as you want it to. I think that works. Obviously, this is a very quick thing. Usually renders like these can take me a lot longer. They can take me a couple of maybe like 4 or 5 hours. I'm not going to do this for 4 or 5 hours. This is a very quick thing. And I'm also kind of just doing something really basic as well. But of course, if you're, trying to get something done in an hour and you think, oh, it's not working, don't worry. These things take time. It's not going to just click instantly. It's a process of iteration. Try a bit, see how it looks. Try a bit, see how it looks. Keep trial and error, and eventually you'll get to something you're happy with. I think Tahu's all right. So we're now going to go to the Borok. I don't want him in a ball, so I'm just going to bring him back to his original pose. And I'm just going to... Obviously, the Borok's not as flexible as Dear Tahu, but I'm going to see what we can do to make him interesting. I don't exactly want the exact same pose as the reference. So for this, I'm just going to rotate his legs out. Notice how Borok limbs are really not that flexible. There are people much better than me who can make them flexible. I am not those people. So until someone can lend me a split Borok arm piece, I am at the mercy of stud.io parts. What I just did there, which I think kind of worked in our favour, is I actually rotated the Borok to look closer down. I'm rotating them like this, you see? Because I feel Borok work better when their heads, their faceplate, takes up most of their body. Because that's the part people remember. People remember the face or the head of a Borok. No one remembers the body. The body's just there to support the object. The head is what matters. So having the head be the main point of reference is really quite important. Interesting dynamic to have the Toa be very human in motion, but the Boroks be stiff robots. Yes, that's a very good point. Obviously, you're going to make art that you think works best, but these are characters, and if you want to stay close to the lore, which I try to, you are, in my opinion, going to get a more rich response from your art as well, because people, like probably many people on this stream, are all going into this thinking, oh, Borok like this, or Tahu's like this, or Tahu wouldn't cower, he'd be proud, he'd have his arm up, he'd be firing a sword. If you have poses that mimic the personalities and the lore behind these characters, it's going to hit that much harder when people view it, because you're marrying the idea of what they are versus what they see. If you just have a cool pose of Tahu jumping in the air, yeah, it's a cool pose of him jumping in the air. But if you do a cool pose of him maybe jumping for a mask, all of a sudden it makes much more contextual sense, and people are more likely to think, wow, I love this. This is a moment from the story. This is like coming to life. This is what I like. So do try to bear that in mind. You don't have to, but it's a big tip if I had to give one. Let's get another leg. Borok are awkward to get, so I don't worry too much about their legs. Borok's arms, they're just kind of stubby and just sitting there. Don't think I'm hating on Borok, by the way. I love Borok, especially Tanok. He was my first Bionicle. But they are awkward to pose. And so for this chap right here, I am thinking I'm going to make his arms up in the air. But actually, that's what they got in the reference. His arms are kind of out shooting over his head, which is often the pose I go for. So I'm going to do my best to get something somewhat, relevant to that. And we are going to mess with the neck of the of the Borok. Don't worry, we will be looking at that neck. So I'm going to just get something going. I think this works. This is why they have the flying piranha. How do they walk? They don't. That's it. That's exactly it. When in doubt, they fly. And sometimes it's best to get everything in camera, but of course, if I just have his arms both there visible on camera, it kind of looks a bit weird. So don't always feel like you have to. Don't be afraid to cut some things off. It's sometimes better to have a visually more interesting poster than it is to make sure everything's seen. Bring that in, and again I'm going to refine this further as well. I don't need to worry about too much about this foot, even though it's cutting through the floor. Look at the render, it's not there, so we don't need to worry about it. Go to the neck. As usual, I bring the neck out, and then I bring the head out. And then because of that new perspective, I might actually just rotate it a bit. And the benefit of the way I've rigged it up is you can rotate the head to bend a bit. they did this so much in the official art, and everyone's like, oh, Barok looked lovely in the art, and then when someone makes a render of it, they're like, oh, it looks a bit static. That's because Lego continuously bent the pieces in all their official artworks. So don't be afraid to bend and, move pieces around. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is make good art, not make something that is exactly like the Lego. It's up to you. It is entirely up to you. I think that works better. What I'm doing here, just to explain what I'm doing, the angling of the heads, I'm going to rearrange this in a second, this is a bit too close, but the angling of the heads are so they are both looking down. So this, if you were to draw a line, there's a line going down as Tahu's looking this way, and the Borok again is looking down this way. I've tried to do a mix of both in my art. Yep, good shout, Agitation. And so I think that works. So I think in this instance, the Barok kind of works, but he needs to be further away. And again, this is trial and error. I wouldn't have known it needed to be further away until I, made the pose and looked at it in the camera. Now I've made the pose and seen it, I go, oh, I think it could be better. See, this is looking a bit better already. This is the arty-fartsy part. This is the part where there's no science. There's no science here, pal. This is just do what you think looks good. And sometimes that doesn't make sense. I think that's much better. Yes, he's clipping, but we're going to use light to try and, separate our objects a little bit better as well. In fact, what I'll also do is I will just move Tahu along a bit like this. Oh, look at that. Now there's a bit more space. It's less crowded. We weren't really looking at that side of him anyway, so just moving him along is giving a bit more space. And for reference, to come right back to the beginning where I talked about the rule of thirds, these dotted lines being the rule of thirds, you genuinely want something of importance to be where the lines meet. And so that's what I've done. His head is there. The Barok's head is there. His sword, it's not exact, but it's there. I could even make the sword link up to there if I wanted to. There you go. Is that more dynamic? I don't know. You tell me. But all of a sudden, I personally think those poses work. If someone doesn't, shout out now before I move on to the next section. So what I'm going to do now is I am just going to save as. I'm just going to save this as pose 1. I just name my things like that. You can name it anything you like. And now we're right to go on to lighting. Now, I am streaming. I don't know how much power that takes. It could break my computer. Who knows? I've not done this before. But we're going to go into lighting. But before I go into lighting, I'm going to very quickly explain to you the difference between Cycles and Eevee. And those of you who never used Blender before might be thinking, what on earth is Cycles and Eevee? Cycles is... easiest way to explain it, it's a nice renderer. It's realistic to a degree. It simulates how light actually works. It looks really good. It's going to give you really almost lifelike results if you do it correctly. The downside to Cycles is it's extremely resource intensive and impressive. If you don't have a very powerful computer, you might struggle to use Cycles, which is fine because there's an alternative, and the alternative is something called Eevee. Eevee is something more like you get in like a video game. It doesn't look quite as realistic, but it's pretty good. There are different skills to using Eevee and Cycles. Believe it or not, most of my original art I did in the book is Eevee. It was only until, I want to say, a year later I actually switched over to Cycles. So don't feel like if you're not using Eevee, if you're not using Cycles, that you're at a disadvantage. Don't. Most of my art was made in Eevee. Eevee's great. You just need to know what you're working with. Art is about working within limitations. And just as a side thought, notice how earlier I said you don't need to make sure the scene looks good. Matthew says, I don't know what Eevee is though, so not sure what doing in Blender. Don't worry, Matthew, I will show you Eevee in a moment. Earlier I mentioned about the scene doesn't need to look good outside the camera. This is a perfect example. This Barok looks weird as hell. And Tahu here, he's fallen through the floor and his pose does not make sense at all. But in the camera's perspective, all of a sudden it's way more dynamic. So you want to make sure that you're not getting too dragged down by the concept of making sure everything looks good at all positions, because you're never going to win if you do that. Make sure it looks good in the camera, that's all that matters. But to answer Matthew's question, what is Eevee and what is cycles? Okay, on the right hand side of the screen, in the render properties over here, you can see it says render engine cycles. Currently it's in cycles. I'm going to go to Eevee, and at the top here, I'm going to press this button here. I'm actually going to turn off the rule of thirds for now. Don't need them anymore. I did that by turning off this button here. But I'm here, these are, I should probably explain from the beginning, these are your viewport shading views. So if I click this one, this is wireframe, ta-da, you get a pretty classic look at the wireframe, the polygons and all the models. I've used that a lot in my art, showing the polys. That might be something you want to use. This here is solid view. That shows you just the characters are just very, very, very basic material colours. Really good for blocking things out. Material view, or viewport shading as they call it. This, without any real lighting, shows you your materials working a bit more better in real time. You can add lights and stuff. You can really use them a bit more, but that's not what this viewport's for. This is what's for viewport shading. If I click viewport shading, all of a sudden it looks a bit weird. I've not added any lights, so don't worry. This is what Eevee looks like. You have to work a bit harder with Eevee to get some good results out of it. My materials, by the way, I've used for this, they aren't optimized for Eevee. At the moment, they are best for cycles. If you want them to get working well in Eevee, it's a pretty easy fix. All you do is you select a part, like Tahu's arm here, go to materials, go to edgeware, drop that down to 0. Notice how it's no longer faded. Same with the mask. Drop it down. There you go. It's looking a lot better. I'm going to be working in cycles because I prefer cycles. But if you can't use cycles, you can do what you like. Also, as a small note, I did put it in the description, but if you are questioning why Tahu's sword looks really weird, that's because I split the model into 2 parts, so you can make the sword light up on fire if you want it to, like what I've kind of got going on here. If you don't want to, you can just change the sword colour to Tahu red, and it will look like that. For this purpose, I might actually just leave it on Tahu red. So, lighting. The most critically important part of any render. You can have the best modelled character in the world. You can have the most dense an environment in a scene. And you can have the best camera work possible. But if your lighting sucks, your image sucks. And I do not mean that lightly. Lighting is key to everything. Good lighting can make the worst models and the worst position scenes look good. Because the eye, the human eye, is more attracted to the way things look with lights than they are to their position. You know, if you take a photograph of something out about, in the real world, and there's no real lighting on it, your eyes are seeing way more colour and light, and so it looks really good. You take a photo and you think, wow, that looks really flat. That's because the camera can only see so much colour, but the point I'm trying to make is it doesn't capture the same lighting, it doesn't look as good, it looks more flat, it doesn't look how you want it to, and it looks a worse image for it. This is the importance of lighting. And we're going to see the before and after of this as well, going from something that looks like this to something with lighting, and you will see the dramatic difference it can make. And it's not good enough to just stick one light in a scene. I know some people do. Honestly, do what I'm about to do. This will save you so much hassle, because you'll be getting lights that you can reuse the same lessons I'm going to teach you in every other poster you do, and the setups for these lights you can use in other posters as well. So, we're finished on blocking this out. We don't need to move the camera, we don't need to move the characters, we don't need to move our environment. So, I'm going to make these untickable. You cannot select them. How do I do that? Well, for me, I've already set it up. You can just press these little arrows next to the folders, and it will mean that you can't move them anymore. But if you don't have that there, press this little filters button at the top, make sure this little tick icon selectables here, and then untick the things you don't want to see. I'm going to go back to cycles, and I'm going to talk to you about this stuff as soon as I've had a drink. Yeah. Really should have weighted tiles better. Right, these sections on the right here, sampling and viewport. This is complicated, don't worry. I'm going to make it really easy for you. Viewport stuff, I would leave it as I've set it. 16 samples, number 1 there. And then denoise, automatic. Just leave it, it's fine. It'll sort you out just fine. What this means is you're having a worse quality of picture in the viewport, so in Blender when you're looking at it live, so you can actually get some work done. If you're trying to crank the quality up, you're going to be here for days. You're never going to get anything done, and you'll see why in a second. When you render, however, you want to change the settings down here. For some reason, it's defaulted to 1000. Some people, like Philip that I've mentioned before, he loves to work at over 1000 samples because he gets really crisp renders. For me, I don't really worry about that too much. I go for usually about 350. You might say there's a better way to do it. Perfect. Do it whichever way you like. In my experience, I work with 350 samples. It's not too much, not too small. And then the noise threshold I leave at 0.01. If you find your vendors are struggling, you can crank this up to 0.1. I might even do that just for reference here. And then on denoise, if you are doing a picture, like what I do most of the time, I'd really recommend turning denoise on. The reason why is because if you don't turn denoise on, in fact, I might just show you. If I turn this button on now, notice how everything looks a bit pixelated? That's because it's not denoising. And that noise, those little pixels, they will be there in your final render, no matter how high quality you make it. So, I recommend turning on denoise for posters. If I turn on denoise in the viewport, look how everything is much smoother now. It's much, much better. If you are doing an animation, however, if you're working on an animation that's going to, it's any animation of any sort, I recommend having denoise off. The reason why is because denoise in Blender is only looking at each individual frame. It will denoise that frame and then denoise the next, and then denoise the next. And if you then play them in succession, it will look like a water painting because it doesn't understand how the previous and the subsequent pictures look. And so you'll have a bunch of images all denoised in different ways. When you play them back, it will look really weird, kind of like an AI picture. You know how you get those AI animations where someone's tried to denoise them and they're like flickering, but they're like blurred and merging. You don't want that. Turn denoise off if you're doing an animation. But if you're doing a poster like me, turn it on. And I recommend having open image denoise. You can use optics if you've got an NVIDIA graphics card, but I think open image denoise is better, in my opinion. I find it does better results. And just to reveal, this is what Cycles looks like. Already, this is so much better than this. Look at this compared to this. And this is before we've added even any lights. And so you can start to see how things are going to look a lot better when we add a lot of lights. So, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my world properties. And just to see things, I've set the world property up to 15. I'm actually going to put that to 0. Now, the world, so the things, the world the characters sit in, is not producing any light. They are plunged into darkness. And the only light there is the emission from the character's eyes, because I've set that up for you. That's quite cool, but that's not the image we want. We want something that looks a little bit like this. Doesn't need to be exact, but you kind of get these orangey hues and the light. Obviously, they're not really thinking about light here. There's no real clear shadows apart from like here. But we're going to try and get a nice iconic picture, if I do say so myself. So we're going to go to lighting. And this is where these two views help us out a lot. We're going to go add. Oh, we're going to go add. And we're going to go light. And there are two options for us. Now, the two options, well, there are four options technically. There is point, sun, spot, and area. I used to be a spot guy. I used to love spots. And then I used to be an area guy, and I would do nothing more than area. And now I use both of them, and that's what I'd recommend. If you use sun can be really helpful. And I'll show you what a sun does. So if I just click sun, by the way, I made sure I was clicking on lighting at the top here. So all my lights appear under the lighting tab. We have a sun. Notice that our viewport, the sun's looking directly down, and we can tell this because that's our sun right there, and this line pointing down is the angle in which it's looking. And so now you can see that's how a sun looks. And you can rotate a sun, and notice as I rotate the sun using the R key, the shadows and the position of the sun changes. And I can even rotate it like this, and you can get some really cool effects. I don't like suns because they are really awkward to use. Some people may prefer them. I'm not a fan of them. If you like suns, be my guest, but I'm not a fan. Goodbye, sun. So what I prefer to do is add a spot and an area. What is a point? Point light, imagine it's just like a lamp. If I add a lamp, it's just imagine like a circle, and light is emitting in all directions around it. If I move it over to my characters, notice how there's like this ball of light which is moving around. That is a point light. Could be really useful if you've got like a mask and you want the mask to glow. You might stick the light directly in front of the mask. Maybe you want it directly in front of Tahu's mask, like so. Now it's kind of protruding from his face. I don't really use it too much because you can't be as malleable. So I prefer to use areas and spotlights. So first and foremost, I focus on my the three. The group. There's probably a name for this, but the normal three. So I'm going to go for let's go area. When you do lighting, there are 3 lights that are important on every render you do, and you might think this is an environmental shot. It doesn't need these 3 lights. I just need the sun. Wrong. You always want to use these 3 lights. I promise you, in any render you see, they are always using multiple lights. If you're just using the sun, you're just going to get one light source, and then maybe a bit of shadows. It's going to look quite flat. You want to use supporting lights that they do in photography. And this is, for those of you who may know, your key light, your fill light, and your spotlight. Sorry, your key light, your fill light, and your backlight. This is what you get for being tired and ill and doing this. And so I'm going to create 3 lights, and I'm going to name them. So I'm going to call this backlight, key light, fill light. And you can make more. You can make as many as you like, but they all have different purposes, and you can change them from areas if you want to as well, to being spots or whatever. These 3 lights are pointing directly down. I've got them here. I'm just going to focus on Tahu for the moment. The unity light, the duty light, the destiny light, the 3 lights. Yes, you're very right, Lucy. That's exactly what they are. If I go to the light properties, how do I do that? Well, I select a light. I press the little lamp symbol over here on the right-hand side of the screen. And you can see we can change these lights to a spot or a sun or a point or whatever at any time we like. But from here, you can change a variety of factors about it. I'm going to turn off the other light, so it's just our backlight for now. We've got the colour of light, the power. Think of this as the intensity. The more intense the light is, the brighter the light is. The shape of the light, as in an area light. Think of it literally like light is coming from every portion of this square, pointing straight down. The size, if you increase the size, you increase the amount of light that comes out. If you make the light bigger, notice how the reflection on his shield or his faceplate is flatter because the light is spreading 10 watts across a much larger space. Those of you who use real-life photography and stuff, you'll know why that works. Those of you who don't worry. Just play around and see what works, or follow what I do. You can change the max bounces. I really wouldn't worry about it, to be honest. If you're having really bad performance, change it to like 2, but I just leave it as default. Make sure shadows are casted, because if you turn that off, it just looks really flat, like a 90s render. So make sure your shadows are on. And then the spread. The spread is how far is it spreading. And so 180 degrees basically means the light is coming out 180 degrees. So it's going down and all the way to the side like this. If I bring that down to 90, it doesn't really show you, but imagine there's a cone. That cone is way more narrow coming out of that square now. And then I bring it down to like 20. It's even more narrow now, and it's the degrees which is going out by. For a backlight, I'm thinking I'll stick it at 90. And because this is behind Tahu, ironically, we're going to put it in front of him. And I'm just playing around with this at the moment. It doesn't need to be exact because we're going to refine these later. But notice how we've only put one light in the scene, and look how better that looks. Just one light. Compare that to the sun. That sun was basic. It didn't do anything. But we add one backlight, all of a sudden we get this beautiful rim around him, and we can change this and make it better and so on and so forth. But that's it, just in the base settings. I'm going to change this to a disk. I'm going to make the size 0.5 so it's smaller. I'm going to bring it down. And I'm going to angle it so it's pointing at Tahu a bit. And I'm going to change the colour to be more of an orange to imply the flame. Of course, we can mess around with this a bit later as well. So we've got a backlight. And now we're going to add our spotlight, or our key light, as some people call them. Key light, same thing. I could add a area. I could make it a spot. I'll do spot just to show you how it works. This is a spot. You can see the cone here. I'm just going to scale it down. It doesn't change anything about the light. It's just so we can see it better. Now let's position it. A key light. The way it works usually, what you have is if the camera's here, which it is, your backlight is on one corner, key light's there. In fact, can I get an image of how this works? It's called 3-point lighting. Pretty certain there's probably a lovely image of it somewhere. Oh, go away. Yeah, this will do. So you can see here, standard 3-point lighting. You've got backlight, key light, fill light. You've got your object, and this is usually how you set it up. Your key and your fill are opposite. Your back and your key are opposite, and then the fill is directly 180 degrees from your backlight. It doesn't have to be the way. You can fiddle around with it. And then your camera usually is going to be around here. It doesn't have it on this picture. In fact, no. There you go. I was right. Here's a picture of it. Camera's usually around here. You get your key light on some side of the surface. Your fill light fills in the shadows, and the backlight gives through the edge light. And this is a great example here. Key and rim, key, rim, and fill. This isn't what we want. It's way too bright and way too big as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this spot size smaller. I'm going to make it about 25. And might angle it a bit better. Like that. Make it a bit orangey. Maybe what other colour could work? Nah, stick with orange. Make it a bit less. And I'm going to increase the power to 50. See how that looks. It's a bit much. Maybe I'll drop it down to 10. What I'm doing here is I'm just playing. I'm trying things out. I'm seeing what works, what doesn't. This blend sign here, you can see there's this ring and then this inner ring. The blend kind of makes it have a soft fall off on the edge. So it's really powerful in the center and then slowly fades off in power towards the edge. At the moment, it's 0.15, so it's almost quite sharp. But if I increase the blend, it's just going to make it softer. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have it focused on his head. I think that's quite nice. Might actually try area, see how that looks. No, go back to spot. Bring it closer to him. And then increase the size a bit more. And this is just trial and error. Notice how as I'm increasing the size, we're lighting up more of him. And we get these rich shadows. We are directing light. We are using light to draw our viewers' attention. We're not interested in this. We're not interested in this. We're not interested in any of this. We're interested in this. His head. This is what's important. It's kind of too bright at the moment, so I might change that. That's a bit better, I think. I'll play around with this, see what works better. That's quite nice. Maybe I'll stick it to an area. The reason I'd go for an area is because rather than coming out in a central point, it's coming out in like a block. I might make it a rectangle so I can change the shape of that rectangle to make it longer. Change this to 20. Change this to 1. It's better. I'm not sold. I'm not sold. Maybe I'll be sold later on, but for now, think that'll have to do. Unless someone likes the other version, do let me know. We're all artists here. And I'm just going to increase the size of that as well. And we don't really need a fill on him, but I will add it. So the fill, I'm going to rotate so it points at Tahu. And just like our picture showed us, it's going to be opposite. It looks a bit pants at the moment, but I'm going to set this to 25 and then the power to 1. Let's make it even lower, 0.25. Yeah, it just softens those shadows a bit. If I turn it off, really dark shadows, I turn it on, a little lighter. They're just a smidge softer, so they're not so intense. I think Tahu's done. Technically, there's a thing called light linking you could do. It's quite advanced. I'm not going to show you guys here. That's for another time, maybe in an advanced session 2 or something. But this is, I think, a good setup for Tahu, personally. We're now going to move our attention to the bow rock. And before we do that, I'm going to make a collection. How to make a collection? I've selected lighting. I pressed this little folder symbol at the top right hand corner of the screen. And we got one inside which says lighting 1. I'm going to change this to Tahu lighting. And then I'm going to shift click. So I'm clicked, press shift, click to the last one. I selected all my lights, move them into Tahu lighting. Now I can quickly turn Tahu's lighting on and off so I can see what works and what doesn't work. Let's make a new folder or a new collection. I'm going to call this Tannock lighting. And we could do the same thing. In fact, we could even copy and paste these lights because they're quite good. So to do that, I could do Control C, Control V, or just Shift D. There we go. We have that set up again. And then move them into Tannock lighting. Now, take the backlight. Let's start to work through this image. I think the backlight can go there. Get that lovely rim across him like there's something behind him, like a flame or something. It's quite low down, so I'm just going to bring it up a bit. That's quite nice. Let's go to the key. Rotate it around. Point it at the Tannock. That's not so bad. What about that? Nah, that's not as good. I prefer that. Now, in this instance, we're getting this light across here, which I don't like, so I'm going to go to a spot. And then I'm going to move this back a bit. I'm going to rotate it just a smidge up, point it down, so now it's just focusing on the bow rock. It's at 1 watt, so it's not really doing anything, so I'm going to slick that up to 15. That's better. Let's go 30. That's better. Let's go 50. Yeah. And then make it more side on. And then increase this to 150. See if that's... Oh, that's looking better already. Get some shadows. We're still getting some light here, which I don't want. So I'm just going to blend it in by decreasing the spot size. I think that works quite nicely. And I'm also going to make the spot color a bit richer. This is looking a bit better. Now, one thing you'll notice, if you ever pop online and get feedback from other people, and people send these wonderful renders, they're going to go, how can I improve my render? And often the number one thing you hear is your shadows are too sharp. You go around in real life and you look at shadows, they're never super sharp. They have softness to them. And so you can do that here in Blender as well. By default, they're super sharp, but you can... I've got to go. I shall watch this later. Thanks for the stream. No problem. Take care, and hopefully this is helpful to you. If you want to get soft shadows on your lights, you're going to want to increase the radius. You can see this radius icon right here. And this is applicable for spotlights, just to clarify. It is not the same for area. I will show you how to do it on area. But on spotlights, set to 0, you're going to have super sharp shadows. You can see that on the bow rock's face shield, super sharp. But if I increase this to 0.25, look at that, much softer already. I think that's even too soft. Moving to 0.15. I think that's quite nice. High contrast shadows remind me of the 90s renders, very moody, intense. Yes, absolutely. There's a style for it. You know, the 90s renders didn't. They had render engines kind of more closer to Eevee, which I'll go over another time maybe. They didn't perfectly do lights that well, and so you've got these really harsh shadows that literally they called stencil shadows or stencil outlines. They're of a time, they're stylized. Some people love them and they can be really useful. But for what we're doing, we want, I mean, at least what I want it to be a bit more realistic, so I want softer shadows. Even in the advanced artwork from early 90s and 2000s Lego, they actually did find a way to get softer shadows in a lot of their renders. So I do try to do that in most of my stuff as well. I'm looking at this, I think he's a bit flat on the face shield, so I'm going to rotate it a bit more. And really just play with it and see if I can get something look a lot better. I think that's alright. I think that's not so bad. That's not so bad at all, if I had to say so. Maybe I'll... This is where an artist goes, oh, maybe I'll try this. And then they end up ruining their artwork. I'll stick to that for now. It doesn't really need a fill. I'll try a fill with it. I don't think it needs it, to be honest, because there's so much supporting bounce light, so I'm going to delete it. Because there's so many lights in the scene, they're all bouncing off the surfaces, and that's what this number here is, max bounces. It's kind of acting as a fill by bouncing off all these things and bouncing onto the side of Tannock. So I don't think we need it, but obviously in your renders you may find you do need a fill light to fill out the shadows and make it a little softer, not so sharp and not so contrasty. One thing I noticed, Tahu has a gold mask here, and I'm sure if I make him with a red mask, someone's going to nail me for not giving him his gold mask. So let's quickly change that. Going to select Tahu, turn on characters, select his mask. You can see his mask is selected. Go to the materials tab. It says Tahu mask. I've already made it a separate material from the rest of him. I'm just going to make it a gold. What gold? That's quite nice. And then I'll make it more metallic as well to signify it's special. 0.65 on the metallic scale. And then the scratches. I don't know if I'm happy with the scratches on the gold mask, so I'll probably bring them down. This is just me playing about. You guys don't need to do this. It's entirely optional. But for this, I will... bring the scratches down to maybe 1.5. Yeah, it's better. And then bring the scale. No, it's a bit too much. Let's do 1.5. That's not so bad. Yeah, that's not too bad. It's pretty new. He's been in a few fights. Yeah, I'm happy with that. I'll also increase the edge wear. See if that. It's a bit too much. Let's bring it down to 0.5. Yeah, I'm happy with that. I think that works. Right, so I fixed the issue of Tahu's mask. We're getting there. We are really close to getting this render there. We have done the lighting, or at least so far I'm happy with the lighting. So now we are going to untick controls on the lighting, so now we can't move these. I'm going to save, because you don't want to lose all the hard work. We're not finished just yet. We want to add a backdrop to this. There are many ways to do this. You could physically make a backdrop with items. You could bring in some models or some flame or whatnot. You could even go onto BlenderKit and type in fire. And there you go. There's fire. I could drag and drop that. In fact, let's even try that. It might just fail to append the asset. Yeah, let's not do that. There's an easier way. Just use a photo. I do that all the time. There is this amazing site called Unsplash. Unsplash allows you to, I'm just going to bring this into the view. Unsplash allows you to get a bunch of pictures that are available for anyone and everyone to use, and that are really high resolution, really good, really effective. And you know, when you play around with them, you can really get some great examples. So if I do volcano fire, why not? Let's try volcano fire. Let's see what we're working with here. I've got some images already, but I'm just seeing if there's one that I like that I might be able to pull and use. That's all right. I don't know if it's quite what I want it to be. I think I'll go with the ones I've already got for now. But if you guys obviously want to get your own pictures, go for Unsplash. Yes, Unsplash is the best. Unsplash is a saviour among humanity, so I'd really recommend doing that. I always stick my backdrops, my pictures, inside environment, so I'm going to tick that so I can enable it. And this is, when I said at the beginning, there was one other add-on that I really recommend getting, and that's something you can get in Blender itself. It's called Images as Planes. So if I type in images, you get this thing that says import images as planes. Make sure that's ticked, and from there it gives you this little option to go add images as planes. And I've got a bunch of things. You're going to see all my internal systems. Let's go backdrops. What have we got? Volcano and sky. Volcano and sky. Let's try volcano. What have we got? That one and that one. Ooh, this one's quite nice. So I've now got this lovely picture of a volcano that I've downloaded from Unsplash. Make sure it's on emit. You can have it on principled. Principled basically means it's literally like someone printed it on a piece of paper and stuck it behind your characters. Emit means it's technically see-through, and the reason you can see it is all the light in the image, it's actually protruding out like a lamp. And this is really useful because it can light your environment like the picture's lit. So you choose emit, go import as planes, you get this lovely image. Obviously it's in the wrong place, in the wrong scale and whatnot. Let's just move it back. I usually move it quite a bit back. That'll do, just to get some depth. And then I just scale it up. And again, I'm using the S key. Don't worry if it looks a bit, pixelated or whatnot, because when you render, you're going to add so many effects, it's really going to get lost. So I'm now just positioning it where I think it works. Notice already how much better that looks. That actually looks pretty good. And we're not even done yet. We're not even done. Right, so we have a lovely, lovely, lovely picture of our background. And you notice how I can see through it? It's because it's set to emit. And so now this is looking pretty jazzy, if I do say so myself. You get this shadow from where it's, the light is going off and hitting this rim, and it's coming down. So I think it looks pretty good. And to show you what it looks like in a different perspective with the render, you can kind of see how the light is working. Light's coming out, hitting a shadow here. Then we've got a bunch of lights around Tahoe. All in all, I think this is pretty effective. Back to our render. Now we're going to go to one of the last things we need to do before we render, and that is volumetrics. Technically speaking, you could just render as is, and this would be fine, I guess. But let's be honest, we aren't happy with fine. We want something better than fine, and so we're going to actually use volumetrics. What are volumetrics? They're something that kills your computer. Volumetrics are a way to... best ways to describe it, it just makes mist, it makes smoke, it makes a thick atmosphere, it makes fog, and we are going to do just that. I actually have another setup for a for a volume that I'm just going to copy and paste into the scene. Then I'm going to show you how to make it. Let's go volumetrics, paste. I'm going to come out of rendered view so my computer doesn't crash. And you'll notice I got this volume here, and it's kind of misty, and it's got this blue here. It's because I used it on a Gali render. I got this lovely, lovely volume here, which is just a box. I'm actually going to show you how to make it. So let's move this to the side. And what you do is you go add, mesh, cube. And you think, well, I've made a cube. What good is this? Scale up the cube. And then what you want to do, make a new window, change it to shader editor. And over here on the right, you can see we're on the material properties, this button right down here. Press new and call it volume. You technically can call it anything you like, but volume just means you know what it is. And now you have a material here, which is just white. We don't want it. Get rid of it. So now it's black. What you want to do is go add. You can do it down here. It takes forever. Or you can just do Shift A, and you can type in volume. And you want principled volume. Technically, you can do it volume scatter or volume absorb. There's loads of ways to do it, but it's probably easiest you start with volume, principled volume. Really simple. You take the volume bit here. You just click and drag, pop it onto volume. Ta-da! We've made a volume. Easy peasy. You can see it's all foggy. That's not enough. We're going to make this even better. The color of the volume here by default is just a gray because it's trying to be like a cloud or a mist. That's what they think you're going to do with it. If I go to my reference image, wherever it is, have I lost it? I think I've lost it. I've lost it. Oh well. We get a lot of reddy mist because it's a volcano and there's plumes of smoke. So I'm going to change this color to more of a red. Don't need to make it super red. Just hints of red. Kind of make a bit browny, to be honest. Density. 1 seems low. Trust me, 1 is high. You want to go for like 0.1. You don't want to go too high. You can even go 0.1 maybe if it's too much or too little, sorry. I'm going to turn render view on and we're going to see what it looks like because it will look wrong, but you can just kind of see how it works. Everything's a bit softer, a bit more atmospheric. Everything's blending in. There's a lot of fog there. The Borok's further in the distance. He's not as sharp. His shadows aren't as rich and as dark. Tahoe's closer to the camera, and so there's less volume between the camera and the piece of Tahoe, so it's richer. That's generally the 5-second description of how volume works. I'm not happy with this. I think we can do better, so we will do better. So there is this lovely, lovely setup you can do, which is on this one, which I've got pre-set up. Very simple. It's all pre-set up. You have the same thing, principled volume. I'm just going to change the color. And then before it, on the density tab, we have these 3 nodes. You have a texture coordinate, separate XYZ, and a color ramp. To do that, you can just literally go Shift and A, and then type in texture coordinate. Which I'm being blind. There you go, texture coordinates, and you can make one, and then you can go X, Y, Z, and then you go separate X, Y, Z, and then again you can do color ramp. There you go. That's how you make the 3, and then connect them like you see in the image here. Connect them to the density. And what I've done, you see these little 4 points. This color ramp, what it does is think of it as we've said, hey, textual coordinate generated. We're looking at this box and we're saying, hey, this is the generated coordinates of the box. Oh, let's go to this one because that's what it's actually on. And we're going to say anything on the z-axis. Z-axis, what does that mean? It means from the bottom up. It's going up. It's this blue arrow here. Anything up. So we're only looking at up. White is on. White is we can see it. The more white it is, the more opaque it is. Black is off. It's like a matte. If you ever used Photoshop or Premiere Pro or DaVinci Resolve and you've used mattes before, that's how they work. White is on, black is off. Black means we can't see it. White, or in this case grey, means we can see it. And the closer it is to white, the more intense it is. And I've set these little dots here just by pressing the plus icon. So if I press that, you can see it creates one. To give it kind of this gradient, going up from the bottom to the top. So you get kind of this soft fog at the bottom of the screen. That's what I like to do. So we have our ground fog. We don't need to make it because I've already got it up and running. I'm going to scale it on the x-axis. I don't need it to be this wide. So again, S for scale, X to scale on the x-axis. Notice how we're just shrinking it in so it's a bit more thin. Now it's thin and long. Don't need to be that long either. So I'm going S and for scale and then Y to scale on the y-axis. I think that works. Yeah, that works. Yeah, nice. And it's actually too low. All the fog's beneath the characters, so I'm just going to raise it up. And I think it's too high, so I'm also going to scale the z-axis down so it's more manageable. And let's see how this looks. Better. Let's turn it off. On. It's not doing too much, so what we'll do is we'll increase the intensity. So we'll go here, change it from grey to white. I'm just going to remove these. I think that's quite nice. I know I'm not talking too much now. This is kind of where you're just looking at what I'm doing and seeing how I'm doing it. I'm trying to describe how I'm going through it. I'm going to increase the brightness of that. I don't know if I'm too happy with that. Let's drop it down. What I'm doing here is I'm increasing the changing the color of the fog. I want it to kind of be like this hazy bloom. We can change this in post later when we edit it on the next lesson when I get around to it. But for now, we're just getting a nice base that we can edit with, and I think that works. Yeah, I think that's quite nice. Yeah, that's quite nice. And then again, we don't have to have just one volume. We can have more than one. We can Shift D, move it up, rotate it around. You can have it as kind of like a sky if you want to. It's not really doing too much, so I'll delete it, saving performance. So that's quite good. And then the only other thing you could do is you get it in particles. There is a complicated way to do that. I've not distributed particles for you. The better way to do particles is probably to do it in post in something like Photoshop. But of course, if you're making moving render, then you probably want to do that inside Blender itself. That's for another time. It's a whole other kettle of fish to try and make particles. So for now, I think this is not too bad. And what we will do is I'll quickly show you how to do depth of field if you want to before we render. So select our camera, scroll down, and there's this tab which says depth of field. And again, just to remind you, you need to be selecting the camera data properties. Turn on depth of field. Similar to the background, planes with opacity is also a good, easy solution versus actual particles. Yes, good shout. Yes, absolutely. You could, if you've got an image which is transparent of particles, you could just drag that in to your render and use that. A lot of people actually do that. Of course, if you want it to move, you'd need a transparent video, like a video of an alpha layer. That might be a bit confusing for some, so it's there and I can talk about it at a later time if you want me to, or you can find other tutorials that go over that. But it's all about working within your means. This is really blurry. There are two ways to do depth of field. You can, well, three ways technically. You can manually change the distance by dialing this in here, which is kind of like doing it by eye. I don't like to do it by eye. You can select a focus object. Sometimes I find it doesn't really work the way you want it to. So what I like to do, I'm just going to turn depth of field off, and I'm going to go to camera. I'm going to create an empty, that thing I talked about earlier. I'm going to go empty, plane axes. Ta-da! We have these lines now. I'm just going to scale it up so it's just kind of there. Don't worry, I will get this working properly in a minute. Select our camera, go to depth of field, select focus object, and now tick on the empty. What this means is where you move this empty to, the camera will focus. So now, if I move it to the bow rock, the face shield, by the way, good thing about empties, they don't get seen. They're invisible. You can't see them in a render, which is why they're super useful. Look at this. I've not even kind of played around with it too much, but that's quite nice. Dahu's blurred out, the background's blurred out, the bow rock's in sharp focus. It kind of looks like something like a frame out of a film where the camera's rack focusing up to the reveal of the bow rock. You know, that is definitely something you could do. I'm of two thoughts as to whether I should do depth of field for this. Let me know if you want to do depth of field for the render, because I will make this a proper photo and I will properly release it, and I'll also release this scene as well if people want me to. But so we can all decide, do you want it to be depth of field? Do you want it sharp or do you want depth of field? I'm going to kind of play around with the depth of field whilst people decide. If no one decides, I'll make a decision. Going down for depth of field controls, you can see it says aperture here. By the way, make sure you're selecting the camera to see these controls. Go to aperture, your f-stop. If you guys know about cameras, you'll know what these things mean. If you don't know about cameras, I'll tell you what they mean now. Blades is how the bokeh looks. You know how you get those kind of circles where things are out of focus? That's blades. If you just set it to 0, it's going to be like this circle, but you can make things like octagonal or hexagonal or so on and so forth by increasing the number of blades. Rotation increases the rotation of those blades. You don't really need to worry about it. And ratio, I don't even know if I can properly demonstrate this. Ratio just means the depth of field is more like stretched on like the X or the Y axes. I don't really play with that. You can, it's absolutely a choice. Some high-end cameras really use that to good effect. We're not doing that here. You can play around with it if you want. The one you're most interested in is going to be f-stop. Most people go for about 2. 2, you get a really shallow depth of field. By shallow, what I mean is if I look at this screen here and the camera's here, and we're focusing here, imagine you've got a small area which is sharp and then everything else behind and in front of it is blurry. The f-stop indicates how wide that area of things being sharp is, or at least the fall off. And obviously that's a lot of words. You might say, I haven't got a bloody clue what you're talking about. You can see that in real time by just increasing this number. If you increase this number up to 20, look, he's more sharp. There's still depth of field there. He's a bit softer, but it's not nearly as intense. Maybe leave it an 8. 8's all right, but then it's like, why even have depth of field in the first place? Maybe 6. It's quite nice. I don't know if it's just delay or if no one has any opinions on depth of field, but I'll probably go without depth of field this time. It gives me more malleability in the composition process. I'm quite happy with this. I think it works quite well. One other thing I'm going to do to separate the backdrop and the Tannock here, and just give a bit more separation here, I'm going to add in some more volumes. Very simply, I'm just going to Shift D, I'm just going to rescale these. And all I'm doing is just blocking it out. And what I'm trying to do is make more of a separation between foreground and background. It's kind of hard to see. I can see it on my screen. There's a bit softer down here. I think that will do. I personally think that will do. Does anyone have any questions before I round up this and also go over how to export it? Speak now or forever hold your peace. What I'm going to do, because I know there's a delay, can't get around that sadly, I am going to just carry on. So, if you want to render this, what you want to do is you want to go to your output properties. Output properties chooses your resolution. This is just 1080p for now. I usually render in much higher resolutions, and the reason I do that is twofold. Number one, future-proofing. You get more... It can be used more down the line. Obviously, if you make a 1080p render now and then a year from now you think, oh, that was really good, I wish it was higher res, you may have lost the project files and you don't want to go through the comping process again. It's easier to just do a high-end render at the beginning. Number two, the higher the resolution, the less noise and issues you get in the image, believe it or not. You might think it's counterintuitive because it's more taxing on your computer, but actually it makes it easier. So, you can manually input the number here, so you could work out what the resolution for 4K or 8K is. I usually do 8K because I'm crazy, but I'm going to do 400%. This now means that it's going to render at 4 times the size of this. We're not doing, I always do renders in 4K now. You see, get on my level, I do renders in 8K, I'll have you know, my friend. 8K is where it's at. I jest. 4K is great. I actually started out in 4K. Most people aren't seeing it in higher than 4K anyway, so it's more enough. I only have it 8K, like I said, future-proofing, and also so I can punch in and zoom in on my pictures. We've got the frame range here. That's for animation. We're not doing animation, so don't worry. Output. Now, there are some that would say, and I'm actually going to pause the render so doesn't. By the way, if your computer's being taxed quite hard, just pause it by pressing this little button at the top here. It will stop rendering, and it will keep the frame you see on screen at once, so it's just not going to tax your computer. 16K, bloody hell, Lucy. I mean, if you want me to do 16K, I can. Well, that'd be like 8 times, wouldn't it? Let's do 800%. I think that might be too much. Let's do 400, because I'm pretty certain you get to a point where Photoshop just literally doesn't want to work with you if you're working like 16K. So yeah, we got a lovely 8K render here. Going down to output properties, file format, PNG. I actually recommend doing PNG. I'm just going to take a drink. Throat gets really dry, especially when you're ill, when you're talking this much. I do PNG for 2 reasons. Number one, it allows you to get transparency. So for example, if you have an image that is transparent, maybe you don't have this backdrop image, PNG allows you to do that. And there's some really good reasons why you'd want to do that, which I'll show you in a second. Number 2, people online, or people who are in the business, or people who know this stuff, would actually recommend not rendering in PNG. They'd recommend doing something such as an EXR. EXR, for those of you who don't know, it's just a different file format that's it can store way more in it. You can have more color, more light. It's just way better. The problem with it is not every system or every computer or every editing program is really set up to use EXRs. And also, when you use EXRs, you're probably doing HDR. And of course, to teach people how to color grade in HDR is a whole other kettle of fish. I do color grading almost every single day for film, and I'll tell you what, color grading in SDR, standard dynamic range, which you see on most screens, is somewhat simple in comparison to the hellscape, which is HDR. So we're not going to go over HDR. Also because people may not even be working on HDR screens. Surprisingly, the HDR screen you probably own is your phone. If you got a new iPhone or a new Samsung or Android or whatever, that's probably going to be HDR. If you just looking at your computer monitor, there's a very high chance you're only looking at SDR. So we're going to go SDR. And for that reason alone, I go PNG. Smaller files, easier to work with, and also even if you output an EXR file, you then got to convert it into SDR. You got to fix the colors. Someone who doesn't know what they're doing is going to load it up into Photoshop and go, "What on earth is going on here?" So we work with PNG. I set it to 16 bits of color depth. Just means you get the most color you can. And then I set the compression to 0. Temp, because we're going to change the export location later, you can change it to wherever you want it to be. We're not going to render on stream because you'll be here for hours. But I'll show you how it starts and how to do it. But before I do that, I'm going to show you the other things I do, because if I start to render, it'll probably freeze. So this is our lovely image, but of course when we go to editing, which I'm going to show you in another session, you're going to want what I call mattes. You're going to want things that can separate your objects and your scenes and your characters pretty easily. How do we do that? Well, what you want to do, and I'm going to come into a material view here just for reference. First and foremost, you can turn off certain things like the volumetrics and the environment, and then you're just left with the characters. And then as long as in your render properties, this button at the top right over here, as long as in there, under film, you've got transparent selected, it means when you render, all this grey in the background will be nothing. It'll be transparent. You'll just have the colour of these. And though they look ugly, that's fine, because all we want is a matte of the characters. And so what you do is you go View, Render Image. It will take a moment because it's not going to be too hard at all to do this. There you go. It took like, what, 5 seconds? We now have a matte, and this checkerboard pattern indicates what is transparent. So even if you look through the gaps in like Tahoe's mask, that's transparent. It just saves you cutting it out manually in Photoshop, which will never be exact. So we have our matte of the characters. I'm going to save this as, I'm just going to go raw, and I'm going to go lessons, and I'm going to go mattes. And I'm going to go character matte. Save. Give it a moment to think. And once it decides to wake up, ta-da, we have saved this image. Ugly, but useful. Same thing we can do with the environment. And what I'm actually going to do is turn off this background image. So now we just have this environment, and this is useful. And you'll see why in the next time when we go over this. So now we have just the environment. Same thing, save as, change it from character matte to environment matte. Save as. Give it a moment. Ooh, it's taking some time. Right. Let's turn that back on. Turn volume matrix back on. And turn the characters back on. Now, those are the two mattes I'd recommend to get. What I'd recommend to do before you render is to, if you go to View Layer, this View Layer button right here, View Layer Properties, you see it says Passes and then Data, and then there's Light and Crypto Matte and so on and so forth. I would recommend you turn on, what am I looking for? Mist, Emission, Ambient Occlusion, and Volume Direct. You won't get these images until you render, and when you render, I won't be able to show you until next week. Or next time. I don't even know if I'm doing this next week. Next time we do this, I will be able to show you how this works, but make sure those are ticked, and then when you render it out, you'll be able to basically extract out different passes of your image. In fact, I might even see if I can render out like a really bad version of the image just to demonstrate. I'll set it to like 5 samples, and I'll set it to 1 and see if that makes it fast, just so I can show you guys. The only other thing I'd do is on Mist, you want to go to World Properties, go to Mist Pass, and then from here, you want to go to this little arrow at the top, where it says Render Pass Combined, tick that, and go to Mist. You get this lovely black and white image. From here, you can essentially choose the depth. The start is how close it starts to the camera. I think leave it at 5. And then the depth is how far, how deep does this picture go? That's not really doing what I want it to. Let's see if I can fix this on live. Sometimes it's really awkward. There is actually a way to see the depth live when you're working, but I forget how to do that. But for now, I think I'll just leave that as is. Then you get this black and white image of the depth. But that is how you create a depth map. And again, once you've got that, you can then go View, Viewport Render Image, give it a moment, and then you get this. I'm going to go Image, Save As, call it Depth. And now for the moment of truth. I'm going to see if I can render live on the stream and see if I can get it to render as quickly and ugly as possible, just so I can show you how to use the compositor to do this kind of stuff. So the last thing on render, normally I'd have the set to 350 and this set to 0.01. I've got it set to different, just to see if I can get this done really quickly. Going down to performance, if you have a bad computer or a computer that's struggling, go to use tiling, and then tiling, think of this as pixels. Is YouTube compression making that look just black and white, or is it grayscale? I did before on the camera. Yes, Lucy, it should be grayscale, and it should be black, grey, and white. It's just not showing up properly for some reason. On tile size, I usually set it to something like 1080. 1080 allows you to, basically means it will do 1080p chunks. So it will just do little bits of the image. So it's not doing the whole image at once. Because I'm trying to do this quickly, I'm turning that off. I'd recommend for you guys, you turn that on, however. And then I'm also going to turn this down to 100% just for now, so I can do a quick render. And see if that speeds us things up. Save so we don't crash. render image. How long is it taking? It's not going to take long at all. To be honest, that's not half bad for five samples. I mean, there's worse images, but that's not half bad. So there we go. That actually didn't take too long at all. We have our render. How do we do more? So you could save this and you go image, save as, and then you just save that as the image. So I'm going to call this, I always do the name of the poster and then ref for reference. Save. Keep this window open, don't delete it. Go back to Blender, go to compositing, and turn on use nodes. Go Shift A and type in viewer. This will let you view your image in the compositor, which lets us do a bunch of really funky things. So I'm going to go again, Shift A, and this time the only one I really recommend doing is glare. Change glare from streaks to fog glow, medium to high, size to 6, and then just drag it in the line. You see the line goes white, let go, takes a moment, and look at that, you can already see it's blurry, or not blurry, bloomy. There's no bloom here, the light isn't blooming out like it would naturally. Now we're in the render view. Again, to get back to that, just hover your mouse over Blender. You've got two windows. Go to the one where the render is. Click this little icon. We're on render result. We actually scroll down to view a node. You want view a node. Ta-da! We get some, it's probably quite hard to see. But you can see a bit of bloom. Might even increase that size. You can see the bloom's increased. I usually have the bloom quite intense because you can dial it back in post. But once you've got your bloom, go save as, and then do poster ref with glare, or with bloom, or however you want to word it. And there you go, you have that. I mentioned earlier about turning on other things like ambient occlusion and volume direct. What are those and how do they work? Right. So, take your ambient occlusion, which is AO, drag it over image, let go. You get this really noisy image. So, the way to fix that is you want to add in a denoise node. Again, Shift A, type in denoise, drag it in, give it a moment to think about it. Got a nice little smooth denoised image. So now we can go back to our render. Here it is. You can see it's automatically updated to the ambient occlusion. What is ambient occlusion, you might ask? It's just contact shadows. It's just, shadows between things. If you look at the crevices, there's shadows in there, shadows in there. It's just a way for us to get richer shadows when we edit our picture together. So then we go image, save as, and again, I then do poster AO, so I know it's the ambient occlusion. And then again, we don't want the AO, we want to go volume direct over to image on the denoise, because otherwise it will be really grainy. And you can see it's all horribly blotchy, and that's because we rendered at really bad settings. But, oh, where is it? What this means is we can use the volume, the smoky look, to amplify our renders a bit more. And you can see it's cut out. Could you use this type of process with animations as well? Absolutely. Everything I'm showing you here is absolutely the same for animations. Only point of reference, when you're doing an animation, do not render as an MP4. Please, for the love of God, do not render as an MP4. At worst, render as a PNG sequence. At best, render as an EXR sequence. So many things can go wrong with MP4s. They're terrible codecs, or containers, I should say. I'd recommend doing an image sequence, and then once that's finished, you can bring that image sequence into the compositor and Blender and do it exactly as I'm doing right here. You can get your volume, your AO, so on and so forth, and you get some really nice looking pictures from it. Same thing, image, save as. This is volume direct, so I'm just going to call this volume, save. Notice how just for one image we're getting a bunch of different things. That's because these things are always useful. Not me having exported automation in MP4, whoops. Well, let's just say at least they worked. MP4s are prone to breaking, not to mention when you do an MP4 you are rendering in something known as, if I can find it, where is MP4? I'm being blind. I actually can't see it, and I think I'm just being an idiot. Oh, it's probably FM. No, I'm being an idiot. I can't see it. Basically, Carter just say hi. I unfortunately did not find the time to join you today, but I'll need to push. Unacceptable, Carter Yogurt. Absolutely unacceptable. I ban you from this stream instantaneously. For those of you who don't know, this is the lovely Philip. He's been doing amazing renders online. You may have seen his renders of the Shadow Tower or Matoran on a desk, or he's done so many. He is absolutely talented. It's been a joy to see him increase in talents and skills as he learns more and more, and I always look forward to his renders. So if you want to see someone who does renders like myself, go check him out. He's absolutely incredible, and he's the chap I was talking about earlier who prefers to give the characters more of a plastic look rather than metallic like mine, which absolutely is perfectly fine for what he's doing and looks utterly incredible. Where was I? Yes, very briefly on MP4. Do not do MP4 because MP4 by default will do what's called a H.264 codec. Very simply, it's what we call a lossy format, which means it's trying to get rid of all the information, all the color that it doesn't think you need. Which means the moment you start trying to color grade with things, you end up getting blockiness. If you're trying to green screen and key characters out, that's when you get the compression and the blockiness, and it's just a hell of a way to work. Don't do it to yourself. There are safer ways to live your life. Don't do MP4s. Work with an image sequence. And then if you wanted to, you could also do mist. We've already done a mist, so you don't need to worry about it. So, at this point, and I'm feeling pretty tired because I'm still not too well. I think I've gone over anything and everything. Heading out, love what you're doing with this. Cheers. Great to see you, AJ. Take care. Before I go, does anyone have any questions? Anything they want to see? Anything they don't get? Anything they wish they saw? Anything they saw but didn't quite get? Anything at all before I shut down for today? Because I think I've gone over everything I need to get you guys making a render and ready to edit that render into Photoshop or something similar like GIMP or one of the many other programs at a later date. Wait, so you would have to do this process as a very single frame for an image sequence? No. Get to the point. When you render like a video and it renders out all the frames as an image sequence, like let's say you've got a second of footage and it's at 24 frames per second, you have 24 frames. You can take those 24 frames, drag them into Blender's compositor, literally just drag and drop. It'll be an image sequence, and from there you can do exactly as I've just demonstrated. You can get all those passes out. It's entirely optional, you don't have to. I actually, for most of my renders, literally just got the image, the bloom, and some mats to the characters. That's what I used to work with. I never did AO or volume or mist or anything. I would do this manually. These are just things I've learned over time that have helped me out. So don't feel like if you're not doing it, you're not doing it correct, because there is no right or wrong answer. It's just what works best for you. So don't worry too much. Any other questions before we wrap things up? I'm actually quite amazed at 5 samples. I mean, it's blocky as all hell, but 5 samples wasn't too bad, to be honest. Maybe I should render with lower samples. I don't know. Right answer, whatever you would do naturally. Exactly, whatever you would do naturally. Just, if it looks good, it looks good. That's all that matters. That's all that matters. And just for reference, I'm actually just going to bring this here and this here. I'm going to go back to layouts. I'm just going to show you what we started off with. This is what it was before lighting. This is it after lighting. Look at just what a great deal of difference lighting does. Even if I turn off all the lights and all the volumes and I just add in a sun. And this is the point I'm trying to make. Don't just live with a sun. Please don't just live with a sun. And I'm just going to move the sun to kind of be like this, just so we get something. And then I'm going to go to rendered view. With a sun, it just looks flat in comparison. Like, this is a sun compared to what we did. Like, and even if you make the sun orange, and even if you increase the power of the sun, And even if you, God, where is it? There is a way to increase the, it's the angle, isn't it? Even if you make the sun softer at like 20 degrees to get soft shadows. Look at this compared to this. It's just night and day difference. Don't rely on a sun. Don't just use a sun. Use bespoke lights. Use your 3-point lighting setup. You get your key, you get your fill, you get your backlight. With those 3 lights, you're going to get a beautiful image like this, which I literally rushed, compared to something like this. Please, 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 if I see people just using suns, I don't know, I'll scream really loud. Please don't use suns. Garnables HR says, will the VOD be available for this stream? Yes, it should be. I hope it is. YouTube should save this. From my research, they said YouTube saves streams that are under 12 hours, so it should be saved. As a worst case scenario, I did record this. At least it should be recording. So if for some reason it's not there, I will have a copy and I can upload it myself. So don't worry, it will be available for all afterwards. Right, Carter said, you could and maybe should do more of these kinds of videos streams. You got a really lovely voice and great pacing. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Philip. I do appreciate the kind words. Believe it or not, I'm actually a teacher as well in real life. Not like a school teacher, but a trainer, I guess I should say. So I do have a little bit of experience in this. I was working, so had to pop in and out, but loved what I saw. Thank you so much for doing this. Anytime. Ultimately, I'm just going to turn this off for now because we don't need that anymore. Ultimately, this entire stream has been a long time coming for me because I see so many people who want to do art, who want to get better at art, who have all these great ideas, but they don't have the skills to capitalize on them. And that's because there's no easy way to just do things. It's also confusing and people want to be all elitist about it. I don't care. Make some cool art. Do it the easy way. Don't stress. I just want more people doing more cool things. There's so many people doing great renders in stud.io that maybe they wish they could do more than what stud.io offers. Now you can. You can take your stuff, pop it on Blender, make some amazing renders. You could do so much. You could make animation, you could make film. I know, for example, there's many fan projects out there which are dying for more people to get involved. Bionicle Iliad, for example, are definitely looking for animators and for people who understand this kind of stuff, who understand art direction. If you know and you want to get involved, hit them up. Same with Project Matonary Rising. They are looking for more people, primarily keyers and green screen artists, but also people who know this kind of stuff. The more, the merrier. The more people who know how to do this, how to use this, how to do lighting, how to work with rule of thirds, how to composite your pictures correctly, how to take them from, not to be cringy, but 0 to hero. It's going to help us all. The more people that know how to do this and feel confident how to do this, the more art we're going to see, the more projects that are going to get released, the more people are going to get skilled. And this doesn't just help the Bionicle community, it also helps yourselves. Maybe you want to go into this line of work and all of a sudden you have somewhere to start from. Maybe you're interested in helping out with a project, but you didn't have the ability to do so. Now you can. Anyone and everyone can find this stuff. The resources are free online. The models are available for all. This setup with all the Baroque and the tower that I made, available for free on Gumroad. Anyone can download it for free. Don't feel stressed. It's all set up for you, and maybe I'll release more later down the line if I get more time. But I hope that this stream can be a jumping off point for many to just get stuck in, try something out, see what works, see if you enjoy this kind of stuff. And if you do, well, great, there's a lovely community of people that are all super passionate, super helpful, and will do anything they can. Like every time someone has come to me and they've wanted to do something, I still don't know how to pronounce them, Cart Off Yogurt, or Philip, I just give them stuff. I'm like, you want something? Here you go. You need this? Here you go. If someone else, like Agitation or AJ Francis, as he was on the chat, he wants stuff, great. Here you go. Just anyone who wants stuff to just make more art. That's all that matters. Last question. In your own opinion, would you say this sort of career is a good, stable path for work? Well, believe it or not, this actually isn't my career. I mean, by day, I'm video editor and trainer. I don't do 3D as my day job. This is a hobby for me. This is something I just learned on the side. My day job is rushes and offline and cutting and rough cuts and client feedback. This is none of that. This is just pure get in, have fun. There are people better than me, people more experienced than me that can answer that question better. I won't name them just because they probably wouldn't want me to name them. But if I had to guess what they would say, it's a very rewarding line of work. It's a very competitive line of work. And it's not enough to just know the basics. You have to be passionate, you have to be learning, you have to be trying, you have to be doing every day. There was a great video I watched years ago when I was just learning this, and someone said, if you're just making a render every month, you're not going to get anywhere. Do it every day. It doesn't need to be great. It doesn't even need to be something huge. Just something. Get used to the program. Get used to the workflow. Try it. Stretch those muscles. And before you know it, you will start creating art. If you look back at my first art, the first one being that render Otahu I did, compare that to the renders I've been doing recently. There's a humongous gulf in quality. And that only happened because I kept learning and I kept trying and I kept doing things and I kept getting feedback, and people would criticize me and I'll do better, and people would say this is a better way to do it and I'd do that instead. Everyone should just do, try, and this is just a way for more people to easily do that, break down the barriers, get more people interested. Unless anyone has any questions, I think I'm going to stop on my tirade. I'm going to let everyone go. I don't know what time it is for you guys, probably like early afternoon. For me, it's 9 p.m. and I am shattered and I'm very sick, so I need to go to bed. But I hope this has been informative. I hope everyone has enjoyed it. I know it's been long, but there's a lot to go over, and hopefully you can watch this back and you can see what it's like to make one of these posters. Have a great night. Thank you. You too, David. Thank you very much. If anyone has questions, if anyone has things they missed, if anyone has things they'd like to see, just let me know. Just message me on any of the platforms. Where can you message me? You can message me on Reddit. You can message me on Instagram. You can message me on Twitter, just or YouTube. Just pop me a message, say what you'd like to see, what you'd like to know, what you'd like to have. I'll do my best to accommodate where I can. And when I get some time, when I get some energy, I will attempt a lesson number 2. And number 2 will be going over how to composite, how to take the render we did and actually transform it into something great. It's great to just have a render. It's even better to have something which is just truly composited correctly with color grading and vignettes and smoke and particles and God knows what, and graphics and so on and so forth. So I will be going there. It will be a shorter stream because it's a way less in-depth process compared to this, and I don't need to explain as much, but that will be happening at some point when I get the time to do so. Otherwise, everyone, take care, enjoy, live long and prosper, whatever people say, and I will see you all another time. Take it, guys. Bye. Oh, someone said, we'll have to watch the whole thing. I think what I saw was great. Thank you so much for this. Looking forward to so many new renders from all the news. Yes, I am looking forward to all the renders. That's not me saying I'm looking forward. That's a threat. There better be more renders. There better be more renders from the community. There better be more people making lovely renders. If I don't see a gargantuan load of Tahu and Tannock renders after this, I will be mighty upset. Take care, guys. Yes, may the Great Spirit guide you. Thank you very much, Lucy. You were absolutely wonderful.